I'm not loving that.
Can you hear? Hold on. Can you hear me?
I
Am
can
I
hear
live?
you. Yeah,
Ah,
you're live, but it's only giving me audio, and it's not doing like the side by side or like the up and down, which is what I was hoping, and like to get a
why
visual
is
of.
it doing that?
I don't know. I'm too old for this.
That's so weird. Oh my goodness. Oh my
I,
gosh.
I
I noticed I was in someone's live the other day and I noticed it was doing these weird little like square things at the bottom. And I was like, what
yeah,
is going on here?
it's like some update or whatever. So I'm trying to see if you'll pop up in my, because you can't
Oh,
actually search, right? Like it'll say invite friends to go live as a host. And
yeah.
you're not in there for whatever reason, but I could
That's
see
so
your face.
weird. Hey.
I,
That's a positive change. How are you?
I am wonderful. I went to go to Waffle House to get us some waffles for brunch, and apparently they don't take orders between 1:40 and like 2:10. And I was like, oh,
What?
for shift change. And I mean,
What?
like, I've worked in the restaurant industry
Yeah.
and never did we have to shut down a restaurant for shift change. But
That's
anyway,
so funny. That's so funny. That's very like feel like it's very European that they have like they have like a break
yeah,
there.
I was
Yeah.
like, this is very interesting and odd. And honestly, my first time ever experiencing that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me. I haven't done like as you can see from my not knowing how to join a live also. I'm also new to like lives and all of that. So it's like so I'm similarly like how does TikTok work?
okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
am. This is might be my second live too. So please, no. I just was
Yeah.
like, I wanted to talk to somebody like from the Jewish community because I'm keep
Yeah.
hearing like one thing, another thing, and I'm like, okay, so like, where's this shared conversation? And only because you and I have built a rapport, I would never just be
Yeah.
like demanding, like, hey, you're Jewish, come talk to me. But
Yeah.
because we have a rapport already, and I'm like, hey, by the way, you're also Jewish, so maybe we could have this
Of course.
um
Of course.
conversation because it's so many
Yeah.
layers, right? Like it's
There's
so many
so many
layers.
layers. There's so many
And
layers, and people have been approaching it from so many different ways, and some much better than others. So,
yeah,
so thank you
right.
for hosting this. This is fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think it could be something like that's an ongoing conversation. I'm going to be eating
Yes.
live because I'm hella hungry. But I think it
Yeah.
needs to be an ongoing conversation because I think that where this kind of key goes. Oh, absolutely. This is like literally what I do to like my podcast is called Let's Have the Conversation. I
Yes.
actually enjoy conversing with people. And I think that in doing so, you see more of a shared commonality than us being in our right wing, left wing, Jewish, Black, Hispanic, gay, straight, trans,
Mm-hmm.
cis bubbles. Like if we're not able to kind of come together and just see, and we don't always have to agree either, right? Like I'm not saying I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to agree with everything and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to. But that being said, is that I think that it could be an ongoing conversation because similar to like Whoopi made a statement that Jewish people are not a race.
Mm-hmm.
And but race has evolved over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think when she was talking about it, right? And also race is just not applied the same as it is to us in America, right? So like
Yeah.
there's a couple
Yeah.
of things just in that. And
For
even for
sure.
my own self, I never saw Jewish people as a race of people,
For
right?
sure.
I see them as an ethnic group, right? Like that's a whole like that's like saying somebody's Irish to me. Like
Yeah.
that's an ethnicity, not
Yeah.
a race. They for me, from my understanding, is they became racialized
Mm-hmm.
due to, the guy. I don't think we could say his name, like he who should not be
You don't
named,
want to. Yeah.
Hitler.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like where that kind of confusion comes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think there's a lot of erasure that goes in, especially when somebody's like, no, it was about race. And then like you had a great one that's like, no, like here's Afro Germans, here's Romanis, here's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a huge erasure if we just put the face of Jewish people as what we perceive to be white people. Uh,
Yeah.
Another point, I'm just trying to get them all out so then we can try to, is
Please. Yeah.
the Jewish experience is a diaspora. So
Mm.
like if we're gonna go like all the way back to the beginnings, right? Like these are like African Hebrews, which is like where like when I get the Hebrew Israelites, I'm like if that's the case, then we're all Jews. Like we don't have to exclude white passing Jews. If I mean, I'll go for it. Maybe we're one of the lost tribes, right? Like there were 12 of them. It was a diaspora. That's possible. But that doesn't mean it's exclusionary, because if in fact you believe that there's a diaspora, which I do, obviously as they moved into European spaces and joined up with more European different, or it was going to change, right? Like your looks were going to change, but these are still Hebrews. So like I'm like having a lot of feelings about that, right? Like because for me it's like they're still black people. like that's how I look at it. Like attacking Jews is like, for me, is like those are still black people. They're just white passing at this point just because of the diaspora. Like many of us, even within the slave, like the descendants of slavery, like we have white passing relatives. So anyway, these are just like my jumbled thoughts.
There's so much, there's just so much to unpack and so much to like rumble around. I think one of the things that's been like what you were saying, like we, and this whole conversation and like the conversation surrounding it, 99% of it, what I'm seeing is kind of like revolving around a very, very valid argument to talk about Judaism and race, and like, how white Jewish people are oppressed in very different ways, than Whoopi has experienced oppression. Everyone's experienced oppression. And so that's like one thing that that is central and important to like what we're talking about. What happens is that and I've been, this is something that what I was trying to express in the first video, and I kind of want to think about more, is really like how that narrow understanding of the Holocaust, that narrow understanding of what happened, is very, very detrimental to how we recognize white supremacy all around, all everywhere. And so what's happening is that this whole conversation has been kind of reduced to the conditional whiteness or not whiteness of white Jews, when it's this very, and like it's upsetting because like I'm not seeing that change, where I'm not seeing that, this is where like a lot of people are like, well, this is really upsetting because ABC has suspended her. I think a lot of people, at least like in my corner, have been like, this is absolutely more harmful than anything, is suspending her.
It stokes the fires, right? Because it definitely makes it seem like, oh, well, this black lady got suspended for talking about Jews, and like then that fills into the like anti-Semitic tropes of like, Jews run Hollywood, the Jews run everything, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys are really fucking going in with the anti-Semitism here, right? Like really, as a company, there was a conversation. Their whole fucking show is The View. They have uncomfortable conversations. Like, why did we not dig into this deep?
Yes.
So continue.
How like this would have been such an excellent opportunity.
Amazing.
To have a expert on the Holocaust to come on and say, listen, like it is, and we even saw like it's in that conversation, the other members of The View were like, hey, Romani people were all immediately were like, Romani people were also discriminated against, all these, it was larger than that, and this is how we know. It throws it a little bit more into relief that it's about race. I mean, the one thing that is really interesting, and I was planning a video on this, but kind of want to like recontextualize it. It is like, hello. And I kind of want to like I was going to make this video. I kind of want to like rethink how I want to do it, but of course, there are so many different, within Judaism, we have so many different ethnicities. And one thing, if we're just looking at Ashkenazi Jews, like it's so, it's really complicated. It's like, yes, we are that diaspora. For hundreds of years in Europe, we were intermarrying, we were intermixing, and then we had, one of our other major Holocausts that gets kind of put in the shadows. And we don't really talk about like how Ashkenazi, we were, you know, put into Eastern Europe, we intermarried with each other, and then that's how we became that distinct ethnicity. And so of course we are just that one part of much larger Judaism, but it is I think one thing that we're missing in this whole conversation is that, yes, we absolutely, you know, unless we are physically look different, which is a much more dangerous way to be Jewish. You know, it's a much more,
you're
although we physically look,
Jewish. Yeah.
And we are not identifiably Jewish most of the time. And that's actually one of the like very interesting, insidious parts of anti-Semitism, where you have, you know, people that believe in it, see that kind of adds to like the sneaky trope, where it's like, you know, they pretend to be white people, but they're actually like sneaking around, you know, doing all this thing. And that's why you
just
see
being sneaky Jews out here.
Sneaky
Like,
Jews. So that's where
I'm
you
just
have
existing.
like the yeah. So that's where you have the like, and that's why like, and I was so happy you sent me that video, that like, and that was something I knew that I needed to like, you know, sit back and think a little bit more about, where it's like, you know, her comments, they were wrong. But she was pointing out a really important thing, where it's like by you know, by applying like this very, very different conception of race in current US to 1930s 40s Germany, we can see how it is different, and how like we do need to like talk about those differences. Yeah.
Not only that, if I could just interject, is that like,
Yeah.
I want us to, like, as Americans, right? Because somebody, Arena asked about your background, and
Yeah. Oh, yes.
definitely do that. But
Yeah.
I think that we need to remember, first of all, like, America is a nationalist country, period. Full stop. Done with that, right? Like, need not go any further.
Right.
We only like learned about the Holocaust, and like the systems consistently pit all of these things. That's part of white supremacy, is keeping people isolated, removing them from community, stripping culture, and removing humanity. But we only learn about the Holocaust through an American lens, right? The only reason why we know about the Holocaust is, let's be fucking clear, is because we posed ourselves as the savior of the Jews, right?
Yes.
Because what we never talk about is how Hitler used to come over here and get all of like his race laws. They didn't even, like you said, like, right, like, because there was all of these others, like, Jews are an ethnicity. They may now be a race, and I just was not aware of that. I'll concede that I'm not about to argue with Jewish people that they're not something that they say they are, right?
Yeah.
But like, they were not a race at that point in time. And okay, hold on a second. They were not a race at that point in time. But due to our Jim Crow and race laws here in America, Hitler was like, hot damn, I could figure this out. Okay, how hook is your nose? How coarse is your hair? The Americans figured it out. Even if you have white skin, you're a Jew. And that's where we got these phenotypical ideas of what white Jews look like, because they literally used our race laws over there, and America never tells that story. We just pose ourselves as like, we saved the Jews, we rescued the day. And so we learn Holocaust from our supremacy lens, right? From an American imperialist lens, that not that we had anything to do with that, not that we started any of that, not that we supported any of that, but look at how we see that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. Well,
absolutely. And I'll say a little bit of my background, and in preface to like why I am so passionate's not the right word, but you know, I'm so interested in talking about the Holocaust, and feel like it is such an important thing that we do talk about and understand. But yeah, I am my background in my family, I am Ashkenazi. On my dad's side, we're Lithuanian, Belarusian. On my mom's side, we're Romanian. My grandparents were actually refugees from World War II, and they were actually running from the Red Army. So you'll see me being very. I'm a leftist. I'm an anarchist. But you'll see me being very, very nice. That's how I get. I can tell when we get along.
That makes so much sense.
Yes. And you can see me being in that. I'm very, very critical of people that will kind of want to look to things like the USSR as a model for our liberation, which, I think they've done some good things, but I'm very critical of that view. Yeah,
It's a little bit
so
scary for me too.
it is. And I talk a lot. My main thing is art and architecture. I talk a lot about how art, architecture, textiles, and how we can kind of see all these histories come out in there, and how that kind of perpetuates things. So that's a little bit of my background. The one thing that oh my gosh, wait, what were we? So yeah, that's just my one of my biggest things is that we are absolutely taught, and like a lot of people are saying, this is what people were commenting on recent videos, like, oh yeah, this is how we were taught it in public school. This is how they teach it in private school too. This is across the board.
This is absolutely American imperialism. Like,
yes,
they put us as like, look at, we are the saviors. Like I said, with zero accountability as to how the way Black people were treated in this country at that current. And it happened at the same time. Like Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were the same age.
Wow.
But they literally make it seem like the struggle for Black people was so far back. But the Holocaust is so right now.
Yeah.
And then this is how they stoke those divisions, right? Because you can't go in any state and not find a Holocaust something, right? Like in Boston, New York, you'll find something. So it stokes that fire because I'm Black, like, and I'm in America, and that happened here, right? Like we could Google the Punch Bowl, like they genocided us here as well, but like we get no recognition.
Yeah,
we have no federal protections.
Yeah.
So when they start doing these things, for me, it feels very much like they know exactly what they're doing, right?
They do.
You know exactly what you were doing, punishing a Black woman when the other women on that stage have said awful things, right? And like, don't get me wrong, because I am not a Whoopi stan, because she's been problematic for me since Ted Danson and Blackface. So like, but they know what they're doing. Like, I feel like those conspiracy theorists, hold on. Right. Yeah. Somebody said, then they act like tearing, like African Americans wanting to tear down the Confederate monuments is overreacting. Exactly. Like I have these conversations. I'm like, you'll never go to Germany and see Auschwitz Lane.
Right.
There's no weddings at like the Holocaust. Right.
No.
So the government structures know exactly what the fuck they're doing, right?
They know exactly.
And then it trickles down to the people because we don't have connections. You know what I mean? Like I can have these kind of conversations like with my kid. We were talking about something she posted herself on TikTok. She's 9, and it was like really fucking anti-Semitic without her knowing, right? It was like one of those like, if you love Jesus things, I'm not even actively a Christian like that. Like, she's never even been to church. But she saw it from somewhere, posted it, maybe her friend or cousin did or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, let's back this up on the Jews killed Jesus thing, kind of like, hardcore Christian. And for her, it was easy to understand because, like, when I'm trying to explain it to her, we happen to have friends that are Jewish, right? So I'm like, when these things are said, it's saying that that person is a bad person.
Yeah.
Do you, without them knowing that person, it's just saying everybody like them is bad. And that just clicked with her, right? But that takes exposure, right? Like, because she cares about this person that's in her life.
Yeah.
So she doesn't want to do things that are harmful, but they definitely stoke fires and keep division.
Yeah.
Yes, in Germany, I was looking into German flag pins and struggled to find them. Then I found out. I don't know what you were saying.
That they really don't have them because...
Oh, yeah. No, they don't have anything. Like, they don't have anything that honors the Holocaust. Because that's literally what plantation drives and all. It's literally honoring a time of humans in America.
I was just looking at, and I was just because I'm like super into the history of pineapples right now.
I saw that. I like that.
I was seeing like, out in like some of these economic systems, these companies are so very alive, and like the Dole Pineapple Company, we have plantations that are absolutely like happening right now. We have a number of things that, if America, it's a dangerous thing for the government to be teaching the Holocaust the way it really happened, and the way that our government actually responded to it. Which first, you know, like what I try to tell people a lot of time is that this government did not give a single shit about Jewish people, and they actually still don't. They put our what they do is they put our they sensationalize, and I think they sensationalize and fetishize our suffering. And they make it into something to congratulate themselves, while at the same time being anti-Semitic. So you have like the best example for me is the, you know, 90% of political Zionists who are in fact evangelical Christians, who, you know, say that they are working in our defense, when in reality a lot of them believe that, you know, we need to all return to they're being actually very anti-Semitic. They want us to return to Israel to usher in the end times and all of that. So
oh my God, what?
It's one of those wacky things. It's one of those wacky things. And like what happens is what it's not to say that like it's not to say that like, you know, because I think what happens is that there's also ends up being like pushback when you're like, you know, not only Jews were killed during the Holocaust. Sometimes you get pushback being like, oh, you're trying to downplay the Shoah. And
Right.
what it actually is that, you know, we're actually putting these things in context. You cannot understand anti-Semitism if you don't see how it's interlinked with other forms of the other forms of white supremacy, with
right.
with
and get out of
anti-blackness,
the
with everything.
idea that white people are not impacted by white supremacy. Right, like that has to be a whole other kind of conversation. Like, 'cause that's like pretty much what my platform is like. So y'all don't see how white supremacy and the rules of white supremacy like impact you greatly as well. Like you benefit from obviously the systems in place, but like you're woefully impacted by it as well. And like not adding that lens to it really does make you believe, like, because I know for me, even in my own anti-Semitism and like anti-oppression DEI type of work, I was anti-Semitic as fuck, like, and had no idea, right? Like I'm a New Yorker, so like our schools go by the Jewish calendar. So it's not like I wasn't even exposed, right? Like, but I had the whole idea, you know, they own everything. I believe the Rothschilds, like all of that. And like, I'm lucky that like a friend of mine was like, hey, come here. No. Like, no, hell fucking no, right?
Yeah.
And he and I have been able to like have really good unpacking conversations on both ends of it, right? Like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Where does this mean? And the history goes back so much further.
Yeah.
So then when you start putting all of that into context, and then you start looking at the multiple truths, because multiple truths exist. Even if Jews are a race in America,
right?
If you are a white passing Jew, you are now white. Welcome to America, right?
Absolutely.
If you are, I could be a Jew. For like Sammy Davis Jr. was a Jew. Betty still got treated like a black man. Like, like it, you're black first. Like in America, you're black first. Before you're anything else, that's what white supremacy does. That strips you of all of your humanity, all of your culture. Same thing, you're white first. It's great that you're a Jew. That's awesome. Going 1,000 backs a year. In here, you are white. So like, and that was a really good thing to have a conversation about, like unpacking. And you could feel however you want to feel, right? Like I go on this app all the time. Like nobody gets to take away me being Irish. I grew up culturally Irish. My grandmother was an Irish immigrant. My mother was first generation. We grew up Irish. Culturally, that is my culture.
Yeah.
See this? This is black. And that's okay, right? Like there's no real thing outside of those two binaries inside of white supremacy. And for me, that was the conversation that got missed. In such a great way. And then punishing her, which then in turns is anti-Semitic and anti-black simultaneously.
Yes.
And I was like, somebody said making Juneteenth a holiday. Yeah, we did not ask for that shit. That is capitalism at play. Like that disgusting. I'll take 8 can't wait over Juneteenth any day. But as soon as they can
Mhm.
make some money, now that Black people are marketable, because welcome to capitalism, right? And
Yeah.
similar to like what you were saying, like with Jews, like, oh, you're marketable now.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the things where I it's so interesting to me that the way that anti-Semitism works and that the way that anti-Semitism works is that it's so insidious. It'll get into um anybody's ideology when they don't even realize that it's a part of it. And that's something that like I've something that like we've been thinking about a lot recently on like just anti-Semitism in leftist spaces in general. Where it's like we we don't when there's certain like phrases that people don't know, like talking about like how secret elites are running the world and things like that, that
It's
people
microaggressions that Black people go through also.
yes,
So for me,
yeah,
that's why I see the plight so similar, right? I'm like,
yeah, it's
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 that
so funny.
insidious. It's
It's
that
really
insidious.
insidious. It's really insidious. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't see is that anti-Semitism has always been a reaction against like Jewish presence. And this actually is something with anti-Romani presence as well, which is also how they're very interlinked. Where, we are seen as a threat in Europe, we were seen as a threat to Christian supremacy, to like Christian white supremacy. And because of that, we were, we were blamed for certain things and blamed for everything, become the scapegoat and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's why it makes so much sense. It clicks when you see that the Holocaust, was affecting Afro Germans and Romani and disabled people and, anyone that wasn't upholding
And the
that
LGBTQIA
and the
gets
LG,
complete.
and
That whole pink triangle situation they get completely. But that's again,
completely
it's like
yes,
our history is whitewashed. Everybody's
yes,
history, because if we
yeah,
go all the way back, like my whole like all roads lead to Rome. If we go all the way
mm-hmm.
back to Christianization,
Yeah,
that's it. Like that's where
yeah,
it starts. So like that came out the gate. Like everything had to be like underneath this Christian guise. So it's
yeah,
like apparently there's never been gays or trans people ever until
right,
2019
right,
or something.
right,
So like
right. And so what's crazy is that like you see what happens when like like I believe that like I'm trying to I have to remember correctly, but people were saying that there were queer people who were left at the concentration camps when the American soldiers came and quote unquote freed everybody. We had the ships of Jewish people that were refused entry into the U.S. when they were refugees from Germany. And then we have all of the things that are happening today. One of my biggest it's starting to become really clear that so much of this that and anti-Semitism, that word, can be used as a weapon against people. And so that is one of the worst things where this is something that I've been turning over my mind and trying to figure out how to best talk about. But I have never seen such a voracious, attack against people about that. Until the Wild and Winning situation the other week, and Whoopi Goldberg, when we have, you know, literal Nazis assembling in Florida. We have literal actual powerful
we are the
scary.
Nazis.
Yeah,
America is the Nazis. Like I need
America's
us
not.
to kind of get a wrap around that. Is like we
Yeah, yeah.
are.
And it's so like, but it's just like yeah. So I'm sorry. I see sometimes the comments are coming through and I'm so
Yeah,
absorbed.
I'm trying to do that as well, but I'm like, okay, keep going. Like, we need
Yeah,
to really take ownership of the fact, like, because I don't like any like loose words too, and like again, systems are always at play. So yeah,
yeah,
anti-Semitic is almost like it's like, oh, you can't say anything about the Jews because somebody's
yeah,
gonna get upset. But like, it's
yeah,
the same rhetoric over and over again. They say that about us too, right? Like, oh, you
yeah,
can't say anything about the blacks; they're so sensitive, and I'm like, that's that's it right there. It's like, you guys are like, what the fuck is like, why is this so difficult to just like move into humanity, right? Like, if somebody says it's offensive, just trust that. Even if it's just for that person, then like, like, just trust that. Like, because no, like, and we don't need a checklist, but white supremacy tells us that we need a checklist.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
oh, is that anti-Semitic? Oh, is that anti-black?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Like, I just saw a video this morning with someone from I'm gonna forget, I think Labor of Love podcast, where they were talking about how like people will, and I've actually seen this a lot, and you know, even in my comment sections all the time, people like asking for a checklist, being like, you know, I want specific instructions on how to like not offend people with my interior design courses. And I'm like, first of all, you're asking me? Like, come on. First of all, no. And second of all, like, that's not how this works. That's not how this works.
That's why, like, my work, because, like, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I don't know. My TikTok just evolved into conversations because it's what I like to do. And I'm like, no, I'm going to dismantle white supremacy inside of white people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what we're doing is we're sending white people out to do this work, and they really don't know how to do the. But and some of them are gun ho, right? Like, okay, we're gonna dismantle it. We're gonna make it better for LGBTQIA. We're gonna make it better for Black people. We're gonna make it better for you. Okay,
right?
Secure your own oxygen. And if you were in touch with your own humanity, you wouldn't need my labor on what a fucking checklist is to treat a human being like a human being.
Yeah.
But they're so far removed from their own humanity that they literally need a checklist on how to be humane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That is a problem.
Yeah.
And we need to heal that trauma, because white supremacy is trauma.
Absolutely.
And if anybody has suffered from white supremacy more than anybody else, it's actually white people.
Like, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't
doing this forever, like for like literally a couple thousand years, just like shifting their DNA, shifting their genetics, passing on their trauma, their violence, their silence over and over again. And until they heal from white supremacy, us as marginalized groups are going to keep spinning our heels. Like, it's going to, it's exhausting, because I get that a lot. Like, I need a checklist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like,
it's true. It's true. And so like, that's one of the things that, like, when I look into like just the absolutely horrible things that were so like accepted by so many people, that like, it's kind of mind-boggling. Like, you have to go through like some type of like desensitization, like disconnect from human. And it's absolutely, it is my looking to the systems and looking into also the system.
Can everybody hear? Hold on a second, Isabella, because you're going in and out for me.
Oh no. Oh.
Okay. Can somebody let me know? Can you hear us? It cut out for a second. Okay, we're back.
Okay. I saw someone say something about, is it still patchy? Is it still patchy? Is it, maybe it's my internet. My internet's not doing the best. But it is really interesting to see, like, to look at those systems and realize that, like, you know, I don't like to say that, you know, of course my audio is not done. I wonder.
It's going in and out. Just take your time.
All right. But you can't hear me. So I'm gonna. I don't know. I wonder why that's happening.
You're much better.
Do you know what's crazy? Okay. All right. So let's hopefully it'll stay for a second. So I mean, what's crazy is that I think what I want more people to be doing is just to look at the history of the Holocaust as something that is not that different from what's happening in the US right now, you know, in many, many ways. And of course it is different because we're in a different setting, we're in a different time. You know, there are different actors, and white supremacists have developed all of these very, very, you know, very effective ways of saying, oh, I'm not a white supremacist. You know, oh, I'm not, you know, I could never, I'm not a Klans person. I'm not any of that.
It's binary. It's very binary.
It's very binary. And like one of the more, I think, insidious ways is like you see people, people not, like denouncing, people just not denouncing, you know, Nazism, things like that, where, you know, and but then even just things that it's like it's not just the Nazis, it's at the border wall, it's the eugenics and the COVID response, the absolute, it's our police system, it's our prison system, it's the way that indigenous people are treated, it's all of these things where, like, you know, you will get you'll get, you know, I kind of made fun of if you say that, you know, the United States government is a fascist government, but it's like
but it's, I don't, you know what it is that, see, and then that for me right there, full stop, is where it gets anti-Black as fuck. Because if in fact you do not believe that we as America are fascists, are like the fucking Nazis, then you're not seeing Black people in their experience. You're not seeing that we are still in a country with our captorers. It's like if somebody came in and kidnapped your kid, like, and kept them for 10 generations, and like now, like, oh no, they could walk around free.
Yeah.
Are we free? This is trauma. Like, we're all
Yeah.
suffering from the trauma of white supremacy. Like, we are absolutely fascist. We are absolutely nationalist. We are indoctrinated and not educated, right? Like, I didn't even stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, like, when I was younger. I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I was like a rebel, right? Like,
I'm glad.
Remember, I was like in PS 56 in the Bronx. And I was like, I'm not fucking standing for this. I don't believe it. And I just, like, it just, you know, like, I share a lot. My mother, like I said, my mother was Irish and revolutionary, right? Like, she was like down like Rainbow Coalition. She was like anti-cop, all of the things that usually come when you come from a immigrant family and you know your own history. So like I kind of got that in me, right? Like, so I'm like, right, the army was segregated, correct. My uncle served in the military when Black people couldn't even have guns in the military.
Wow.
And then graduated up into the point where he then became a master sergeant. He was at, when they allowed us to have weapons, he had one. But like, yeah, we're disposable. So to not see, for us to not see America as fascist, or like I said, tying that link of the Holocaust to American practice, and like anybody can Google Hitler learning from America. Like, you could literally Hitler and America. Like, and it's like, there's like, here's 5 books. Have a nice day, right? Like, and literally, like, the nose measurements is exactly what they did to us, right? Paper bag tests, right? Like, oh, you're okay, you're not okay, right? Like, literally these kinds of things. So for me, that is exactly where like that hard line is. And it's like, we could really kind of come together in this conversation because it's a shared experience during a shared time, during shared energetic fields, right? Like, I don't need to be, and I'm not in an oppression Olympics. Like, well, 6 million Jews were gassed. Okay, well, like 12 million slaves, I'm not about to quantify inhumane treatment, right? Like, I don't feel like that's a need. Like, this is horrible. It's still horrible. We just witnessed, like, people just be held fucking hostage in a synagogue. The same way we just witnessed a Black man be gunned down in 9 fucking seconds while still covered in a blanket. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like, when are we going to be like, this government is a problem and we're all in.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And what you were just saying also about no, it's and that's one of those things where when we don't look at all these things as interconnected, that becomes an issue. And one that was what you were just saying about your mom too. I actually, my mom's, but I was saying my parents are also from Queens. I don't know if I I don't know if I told you, but
I did not know that, but I'm so fucking
yeah.
thrilled, and this makes more sense. Okay, good.
I'm from Connecticut, but I very much identify with like my parents coming from Queens and like kind of growing up in like that culture, and being very distrustful of cops. And we were but I definitely was absolutely indoctrinated, like, you know, throughout my whole life, especially as like a northeast I hate to like, you know, say that the rumors are true, but like a northeast like elite liberal, you know, like we're in our very like our bubble where we definitely saw, absolutely, so many people saw us as like, oh, we're the good white people,
Right.
you know, saying like, and you know, we, you know, I didn't see, it wasn't until like, you know, it wasn't until 2020 that I started really unlearning so many things that I were so deep inside of me.
Honey,
And I'm still,
healing.
yes,
You can't even heal until you unlearn, because
until you unlearn.
the
And
learning
that's,
is indoctrination that makes you sick.
yes, absolutely. And it's like, and I know that like I still have like a really long road ahead of me and still have like so much more to understand and learn and unpack.
We all do.
And but one thing that like I've realized, especially like in the last week or so, is that the honestly, it's like what I've appreciated the most, I think, is you know, some videos that I've seen, people going into like into the history, you know, people going into the, you know, this is what happened, this is how, you know, this form of anti-Semitism grew, this is how you can, people are using anti-Semitism to further anti-blackness, this is
And
how,
learn from
you
it,
know,
because like Claudia said, we need to go beyond not being racist. We need to be anti-racist. We need to be
yes,
anti-oppression.
yes,
Because like I'm not here
yeah,
for anybody's oppression. We need to be pro-liberation
mm-hmm,
and anti-oppression. So
mm-hmm,
this way, it's not even like now we're not going to be having these semantics of are Jews a race, right?
right,
Like, are they oppressed people? Then we
right,
need to be against anti-oppression, right? Like,
yeah,
do they also, because multiple truths can exist, do
mm-hmm,
white passing Jews benefit from their white passing privilege? Yes,
yes,
conditionally, until they're Jewish, right?
yes,
Like, because
yeah,
that's how that works. That's what conditional whiteness
yeah,
is. It could be snatched at any
yeah,
given time. And also, I want to say is that thanks to Jim Crow race laws and Hitler taking them and utilizing them, those that are phenotypically Jewish got the nose, got the curlier hair, got the longer faces, are identifiably Jewish. Period.
absolutely,
And they do
yeah,
not get the benefit of the whiteness. You have to literally
mm,
damn near, like, here's the crazy fucked up shit about white supremacy. Like, white passing Jews to not be identifiably Jewish damn near have to fucking look Aryan. And if that's
mm-hmm,
not fucking genetic trauma, I don't know what the fuck is. Because, like,
absolutely,
I have Jewish friends that look blonde, blue eyed. And, like,
yeah,
how awful must that feel for them?
yeah,
Thinking about a family member that could have looked like me or look like you, because like if I see you in New York, you don't look white to me, right? Like,
yeah,
just because there's such a diversity for inside of New York, you kind of can pinpoint. I
yeah.
understand you're benefiting of white privilege, but you wouldn't look American white to me, put it that way, right?
People all the time will be like I didn't expect you to have an American accent.
Right, like you just don't look American white to me, right? Like that, like you just don't, like, so
Yeah.
like I would have been shocked too that you didn't sound like, you know, this idea in my mind of like a Russian woman or a Romani woman. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, anywho, the whole thing is like anti oppression, pro liberation was
Yeah.
the comment. But continue what you were saying. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I mean, what you like, just what you were saying right now, it's interesting because like, um, we, I think that, I mean, that's one of the things where it's like, what, and it's so true that like, I think that is kind of, that it's like downplayed almost, like what Whoopi was saying, is true. Like if we're passing as white, then, you know, if we look white, you know, if we're not visibly Jewish, then we're not really in danger. But as soon as, you know, you're wearing the Star of David, or you're a Hasidic Jew and you're very visibly Jewish, or you're literally a synagogue, like
or a synagogue, right? Like, or a building, like that
if
that
that
is
was
for Jews to worship in. Like, it doesn't matter who's in there, you're gonna catch, right?
That's prone for attack, and that's where you look at, like, we're less than 1% of the population, but we receive 20% of the hate crimes.
Robin said we have to hide who we are, and that is that's why I'm anti-oppression and pro-liberation, because because again, it's like when you start looking at white supremacy and looking at it from systems that, yes, obviously there are people that benefit from those systems, right? More so, like and then there's a lot of systems within that. I recognize that I get more airtime and more play because I'm a lighter skinned Black woman, right? Mm-hmm. Like, my hair's a looser curl, so I become a more palatable Black woman. So, like, my passion or anger, because I curse people out on here, and I still will get like hearts and likes and stuff. I know that would not be received the same from my darker sisters, right? They're like, why are you so angry? Calm down, bitch. What? I don't want to be calm, right? So, like, but when we start looking at it for me and attacking the systems, because even that, you should not have to hide who you are. Like, that is harmful. That is so harmful. And then, like I said, just playing out the genetic trauma. So, like, the only way you get to be a sneaky Jew is if you become an Aryan, which is literally what the Holocaust was about. And it's like, we are doing the work of white supremacy. We are doing it. We're doing it.
Yes. No, that's 1000%, and that's something that I've been talking about with a friend of mine, another political anti-Zionist Jew.
Hold on a second. Somebody said Whoopi was erasing history, so I would like for you to take that over. I don't think that she was erasing history. I think that she was understanding it from her point of view as a Black woman, because race is put onto us differently than it was put onto y'all. And again, Jews were not always a race at that time. They were just an ethnic group. And Hitler literally used the race laws in America to racialize y'all. And from that, I'll turn it over to the person who happens to be.
So one of the interesting things is, like, we look at, of course, like, how race is constructed, and how, like, as Jews, like, we were constructed into a race, like, and that was a much longer project that didn't just start, like, in 1930s Germany.
Hold on, somebody said, I'm sorry to I just was just unaware. I always hope it's some because, like I said, so I have Jewish enough exposure from my friends, so having conversations, again, why I chose Isabella was not like, oh, you're a Jew, come talk to me. It was like, oh, you're my friend who happens to be Jewish, would you like to have this conversation? So we're really unaware because, like, we're trying to survive in the country of our captors. So, like, learning everybody else's history, not on the top of the list. I'm just trying to make sure my son doesn't get gunned down at a park. So, like, just realistically speaking, it's like you learn what you're taught. And American education, no matter what, like Isabella said, whether it's private or like public, it's indoctrination. So we learn about the Holocaust from a very imperialist view of how Americans saved people. And then when the only people they show are white people, how it registers often is like, oh, America saved other white people. Sounds about right.
Yeah.
And they left out LGBTQIA, they left out the Afro-Germans, they left out the Romani, they left out the brown Jews, like they weren't, like it's all
that were there also. And that's what I think the issue is when. So that's why, like, I'm not sure, like, I'm not sure she's, because I'm not really sure whether she was intentionally doing it or not. I do think that, like, saying that it wasn't about race at all does like simplify and make and kind of makes it a lot too simple, where it kind of goes back to this idea of the Holocaust as Germans, which is already a misnomer, Germans versus Jews, and that it was like a religious choice. And so I think it goes into that. I think the one thing that, like, it's easy to think this about the Holocaust because of the way that the US has, like, perpetrated a very specific story. It's easy to say, it was, kind of white people fighting white people when, we weren't on equal
Because
footing to begin.
that's the face that America puts to it, right?
That's the
Because
face that
the
America puts to
suffering of
it.
white people and we save
Right.
them. It's like
Yeah.
you've erased a whole bunch of people. Also, maybe we could use the language is like, because yes, because at the time it wasn't ethnic. Y'all were an ethnic group, right?
Yeah.
But that is what the Holocaust was. That is what white
Yeah.
supremacy is about, creating race.
Yeah.
So,
Because
but
it's like,
when it was happening, it was the creation of the race of Jews, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the point, was to create a race out of Jews in order to kill y'all. Like that was
and the thing is, and again, like one of those funny things is that like we had been thought of as a race in Europe, actually for even like for longer than I think a lot of people expect. So like so that's actually and this is something that I need to learn a lot more about. But if you look at like the beginnings of racialized thinking in Europe, a lot of people like to say, it's only happened a few hundred years ago. It actually goes back way back. It goes back to the 1300s, goes back to the 1400s. And you see us like them looking at different groups, specifically Muslims and Jews, and then they'll call us all the Semites, as that difference that existed. A lot of us were existing in Europe at the time. And so
exactly. Ireland is still colonized by the Brits, by the way.
For sure.
Northern Ireland.
For sure. So that's one thing where it's like we were definitely thought of as I think it changed a lot over time, especially Judaism, and like us as a group of people is still it's fluctuating all the time. It's fluctuated, for hundreds of years. And of course, like it's because of the color of our skin in terms of European Jews, why that can fluctuate. And so like that's why
something, like when you just said like the Jews and the Muslims, do you know it was only like 4 months ago that I knew that Muslims were Semitic as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, and it was mind blowing because like, duh, right? Like the split is like Abraham and Isaac. They're from the same father. So they're Semitic people. But literally, like, because again, our indoctrination is anti-Semitic is Jews. The face of Jews is white. So it's like, if you say anything against the powerful, rich Jews, like, oh, you're being anti-Semitic. And then then now that like, well, that's anti-Islam or anti-Muslim. And like, I did not know that Muslims were Semitic people. And I was like, so ashamed to not, I was like, I was raised a Christian, by the way, and knew the story of the split. So like,
and what's interesting too is that even like that idea of Semitics and things like that, like all of these things are kind of it's kind of like a language family. Like it's kind of like seen as I don't think Muslims do proselytize very much. I think it depends on where. It really depends on the group, but at least I know that like in Judaism, and I believe in Islam as well. Don't quote me, but proselytizing is not.
I don't think
it's not kosher.
Either. I think that's like distinctly Christian, right? Which would make sense considering that's how they came out violent. Like, oh, we've conquered so much and we can't control but so much physically.
Yeah.
So let's create one nation under God and like let's turn everybody into Christians. Which somebody said like the Inquisition, murdering Jesus the Jew, like, hating Muslims, all of the things, right? Making black people evil and removing us like we don't even exist. And like it's Christianization is wild.
I'm seeing comments coming in about like the Semitic and like language groups and things like that. It's definitely something that's really, really complicated. Like it becomes different things over time to different ways. So like, but one of the things that is interesting is to look at how Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are actually very interlinked, when they are often, of course, pitted against each other. And
that's why I had no idea.
It's what we're talking about.
Semitic, right? Like that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying like, oh, being anti-Semitic is being Islamophobia is Islamophobia. It just was wild to me to not think that brothers were of the same family.
Absolutely. But now I'm forgetting where I'm totally. I feel like I was on some type of a track, and now I have no, I have no
I'm
idea.
sorry because like my
No, not
ADD
it's not
is
it's
like
not you. I think it was just it's just me like just going off because like honestly this entire week I've been walking around my apartment being like this is true, but this is true, but this is true, being like juggling all these things around. But I think one of the things that I remember what I was talking about with my friend was this idea of like the project of Jewish whiteness, where like in America especially, we have, you know, as and obviously not all of us, and not all of us are privy to this because of course there are many Black Jews and many Sephardic Jews who have not become white in any way. But there's absolutely like a large contingent of people in our history, in different ways that have really very actively embraced whiteness. And it's a very interesting thing to look at the history, to see how that's happened and how and this is something that's happening, you know, it happens with many different, you know, Eastern European, especially like immigrant groups that, you know, looking at that that question of how does that how do people become white, how do they perpetuate white supremacy, you know, what is that loss of connection and culture and community, that goes along with all of that. And I feel like that's what I'm it there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of things going on, when as
I don't know
I think the
about Palestine to chime in on that, but
oh
somebody said that's why Palestine is suffering. I don't know, and like I've been told that my views on it are like pro
I mean
Israel and anti Palestine, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just shut the hell up then because like that's not how
yeah,
I
I mean,
feel.
I'm not
I'm
sure.
just like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Like that is so. It is a very so. I just kind of
No,
stay in my lane. Stay in
yeah,
my lane.
I don't know where I don't want to get too far into the occupation of Palestine because I know it's not just like not what's on the docket today. But the reasons why Palestine are suffering are manifold. There's a lot of reasons. That's all I'll say is that there's it's a really complicated topic that I've tried to go into before.
Robin,
I'll do it again, but it's something that like you definitely need to have a very intense background and understanding how colonialism works and how it works in the Swana region, to talk about, which I don't know if we have it's off of the docket for today, but
I mean, I'm down for these conversations on a regular basis because it was for me. And my stance from that came from listening to Jewish people and like, and having like the intersections, like, okay, like that's cool on the return home. What about Ethiopian Jews? Like kind of going through all of those things. So it is a very complicated and like, and it's a dangerous conversation to have, like unprepared. Let's put it that way. Right. Because like, let's carry on with Whoopi and Jews and humanity and racializing Jews.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing that I've seen going around, and I think kind of gets at the heart of this, is like a lot of people are talking about, you know, her last name and the choice to have, you know, Goldberg as her last name.
Yeah,
which is
that was anti-Semitic.
So like the thing is like it is anti-Semitic, but like one of the interesting things is that I feel like if you look at like it's also it is so while it is anti-Semitic, it comes from an anti-Semitic trope. But I think when you look at like the power differences and the way that like her mother kind of I was like trying to find out more about the story, you know, like trying to figure out more about it.
I looked it up because I asked, I was like, well, like because she had the name Goldberg, and so let's like move right on into stereotypes. I was like, I don't think I've ever looked. And I'm like, is Whoopi a Jew? Because like her last name is Goldberg.
It's weird. It's weird because she's like it's definitely not. So it's very strange because Whoopi has said things like, you know, I see myself as Jewish, and things like that, which is really odd. And like one of the things where it's like I think what's interesting is that people are so quick to you know name Whoopi as and her family as someone that's anti-Semitic when you know we're looking. I think it's interesting to look at like the aspirational aspects of like her last name.
Let me clear that because like that's not what I was saying. It's like also I don't believe that because you do something you are that thing. right? Like that's some
Right.
white
Right.
supremacist shit. Like I say
Right.
something anti-Semitic, and I've said
Right.
homophobic things, I've said anti-black things. That's not who I am as a person, and I'm willing to
Right.
also unpack and learn.
Right.
Apparently online there are conflicting stories, but her parents named her, like, basically her name means farting Jew, right? Whoopi, from Whoopi Cushion, and then Goldberg is a Jewish name.
Right.
And her mom apparently supposedly gave her that name to be able to move up inside of Hollywood because of, so where it becomes anti-Semitic is that,
Yeah.
one, Jewish last names thousands of years, and they tell a story
Yeah.
of who the fuck these
Yeah.
people come from, like, right?
This
Like
is
Cohen
true.
eye sensor is like
Mm-hmm.
2,000 years ago they were doing eye things, right? Like that's what the Cohens are
Yeah.
known for. So like
Yeah.
they're, for me, their last names tell a deeper story than just
Yeah.
naming. It's not
Yeah.
ownership, it's more about what your family does, and it's a family
Yeah.
heritage. So for me that's problematic anyway.
Oh, for
um
sure.
then too, the stereotypes of like the Jews running Hollywood becomes anti-Semitic. But then when you start looking at intersectionality, it's like what Black people are forced to do: change our names, change our looks, code switch, doing all of this to even be a little bit more successful
Yeah.
inside of white supremacy. So it's like this double fold. Like, yes, it is anti-Semitic, while it's also
Right.
a fucking protection of your Black child inside of white supremacy, which is why white
Right.
supremacy itself is the systemic issue. Like
Right.
everybody's being harmed by it, right? Like I don't think they're
Right.
like, I hate Jews, I'm naming my kid a Jew name.
That's
Like,
yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly like what I'm trying to phrase it, trying to make, and the same thing what someone was just saying. I actually didn't think about, the combined effect of her name, and never really, and didn't know about any of this before this whole conversation.
nor I.
Yeah, and it's true, like, I think it's one of those like very, very weird things um where I don't know, I'm still like kind of reeling where we've this the out where I'm thinking about is like the outcry against Whoopi has been so much greater than the outcry against like literal Nazi rallies in
Yeah. Because it's
in
the woke
Florida.
thing to do, right? Like
Yeah.
it's that liberal progressive, like I thing to do, right? Like, oh no,
Yeah.
because it's right there, because it's easy, it's low
It's
hanging
easy.
fruit, it's lazy activism. Like she said
Yeah.
something about Jews, that's anti-Semitic, get her off air. And it's
Yeah.
like, can we have a deeper conversation though?
Can
Because
we
it
talk about
literally is a misunderstanding of how race
Yeah.
works. And not only that, then like I said, it's anti-Black for you to not even understand why a Black person would be like, it wasn't about race. We
Right.
were literally taken from a country, trafficked around the fucking world,
Mm-hmm.
sold,
Mm-hmm.
and then like in here in this country made property
Mm-hmm.
simply because of the basis of the color of our skin. And that is based on race. So, like, there was a huge missed opportunity on where, like I said, white supremacy simultaneously managed to be anti-Black,
Mm-hmm.
anti-Semitic, anti-Holocaust, and
Mm-hmm.
anti-fucking Atlantic slave trade at the same fucking time. And all
Yeah.
it does is protect whiteness and the
Mm-hmm.
system of white supremacy. Because as a Black person, that is absolutely how race is applied to us. No
Right.
matter what we do, we're not gonna, like, I don't need a tattoo, I don't need a Star of David, I could put any fucking blonde wig in my hair, blue eye contacts, this skin is Black.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get to escape that in any kind of way. So I think that is like where the
Yeah.
confusion, right? Like it wasn't
Yeah.
about race, it's about inhumanity, which it
Yeah.
is also about inhumanity.
Yeah.
Like, right? Because you have to be inhumane as a motherfucker to
Mm-hmm.
pull off the things that happened to the Jews as a group, whether, as a racial class, as an ethnic group, as a religious group. They've been
Yeah.
persecuted on all angles, whatever the fuck you want to say, right? Like whether they're a race, an ethnic group, a religious group, all in the same, they've been persecuted for thousands of years for existing, which is quite similar to us as Black people. So,
Yeah.
like, what the fuck are we doing right now? Like, that's what
Yeah.
it comes down to. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
What do we do? Yeah. And I see someone's talking about how Whoopi is planning something with the ADL and you know, and some more
sense.
reconciliation. And I look forward to seeing what happens. One thing that like what I guess is like just still bothering me is you know, the almost every single response has been solely talking about Jewishness, when, you know, if we do look at the Holocaust, I think the biggest problem with saying it's not about race is that it leaves out all the other people where they were kicked off the street because of their skin color. You know, it was happening like that. And what I worry about is that, you know, you know, in the conversations that are to come, you know, what is going to be centered, like what are we going to be talking about, like what, and if I know anything about, you know, the way that if you look up like what is the Holocaust on Google, it says 6 million Jews died. It doesn't say anything like it's, you have to search to find. I didn't know about the loss of Afro-Germans until so recently.
Me either. And that's like wild. Like, so that's a missed conversation. I honestly, in my own ignorance and trusting of my indoctrination, literally had no idea there were fucking Black Afro Jews that were killed.
6,000. Right? Yeah.
Right. But like, even if you look up the Punch Bowl here in America, I think it was like, that was like literally, so like, this is where we get upset, like as Black people, right? Like, because again, that focus gets taken, because like you said, like, what's going to be the conversation? I'm hoping that whatever education, somebody else was like, how much is too much? I don't want her to be drugged, right? Because like, see, this is a part of white supremacy. It's punishment. There's never enough education, if that's the question. Right? Healing is a journey, not a destination. So there's never enough healing. There's never enough conversations. There's never not enough unpacking. There's definitely plenty of punishment. But like, we have not, as a country, evolved outside of white supremacy's views of punishment and punitiveness. So it's like, you need to, it's like being a Catholic, right? Say 5 Hail Marys, a fucking, like an Our Father. And it's like, what is this teaching me? What is, like, did it get me empathy? Did it say, like, you know, like, for me, it needs to be intersectional, right? Like, like I said, like, let's take the Punch Bowl. Like, they literally took Black people here in America, put us in somewhere and bombed and killed us. Like, that's happened, right? Like, they've literally driven over our neighborhoods and bombed us in the United States of America. Black people have absolutely fucking been genocided. And for me, if that conversation is not happening simultaneously, the conversation is moot to me, right? Because again, they get back into doing that trope of you're centering whiteness. Because while you can be a Jew, but if you are still being white in this country, it's censoring whiteness and not sharing our interconnectedness.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, why does Whoopi think this? Or why do other of us as Black people think that it's not about race or it's just about inhumanity? And why did we not know that there were 6,000 Black Jews? Like,
right.
Why is that not a part of the story? Why is it not a part of the story that America taught? Like, you know, like that interconnectedness. Why is it not a part of the story that what happened to Jews in Germany literally happened because Hitler came to America to learn what they were doing to us as Black people? And by the way, the guy that gassed the Jews were like, damn, them race laws is a little too much.
Yeah.
So can we, like, if it's not intersectional for me, it's a useless conversation, and it's just punitive measures. And then 100%. It becomes, that's where performance comes in, right? 100%. Like, is she just doing this to get a job back? And it's like, 100% how it all plays out.
Right. Oh. And that's where it is. It can be, you know, and I don't want to say that's like, and I don't know enough about the conversations that she's having to say, like, what her motivations are. That's not necessarily what, you know, what I'm thinking about, like, is the ADL, which, you know, the tweets that they had was solely focused around the Shoah, around the loss of Jewish lives, where, again, you know, cannot give that enough gravity, but you know, if we don't look at it intersectionally, then we're not going to even understand
Right.
we're not even
We
going to
could talk
understand
about
the
the
Shoah.
Shoah though.
Yeah,
Like that's what I'm saying. It needs to be, and it does need to be
absolutely.
that deep. It needs to
Yeah,
be that deep. Like the
it,
conversation needs to be. As Americans, we have a very narrow view of when life began, and we all think it fucking
yeah,
happened in America. Like
yeah,
life did not begin at these shores, right? Like I
yeah,
lived in England, and the church across the street from my fucking house was older than this country. Not as
yeah,
Turtle Island, I mean as its creation as America,
yeah,
right? So like, we can talk about the Shoah, and then you can talk about like all of the intersections within that, right? Like we can go back because, like I said, for me, it's a diaspora story, which
yeah,
is not very different than our own as American Black people.
yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah,
so like, I want to hear the story of the diaspora of the
yeah,
Jews, but I also want to hear that like we were a part of that too, right? Like
yeah,
these things are happening simultaneously. Like I said,
yeah,
Anne Frank and MLK were the same age.
yeah, yeah. I
Happening at
saw
the
someone,
same
yeah,
time.
I saw someone say that that the ADL said that 12 million people died, which I'm, you know, I'm
Yeah.
glad to I'm glad I'm good. I haven't been, you know, following them closely, so I'm glad to see that. Um the yeah, so sorry. I just wanted to to
Yeah, no,
acknowledge
correct
that.
that because I think I
Yeah.
said 6 million as well. So I
Yeah.
apologize because that's the number
Oh
that's
no.
always in my. It's not to lessen, and I don't give a fuck if it was one person that was killed just because they were a Jew. To
Right.
me, that is a problem.
Right.
Like
Right. Oh no, I was
12
saying that
million,
like
6 million.
I had said, yeah, well, I had said that the ADL was focusing only on the Jewish loss, and then somebody said that they had acknowledged, you know, there's that they had talked about the greater Holocaust, which I'm the whole thing, which I'm anyway, I'm never mind. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think if I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today. If we want to define, I'm oh my gosh, defining, how do we define intersectionality?
Really,
Um,
really simple, right? So, like, let's give credit to the Black woman. You can Google where intersectional feminism came from. I cannot remember her name. So, where the term for intersectional feminism came from is from a Black woman. She was discussing because how white feminism has never benefited Black women. Black women are oppressed simultaneously because we are women and then because we are Black people. So, like, within the workplace and space, it was like, oh, well, like, we're not being discriminatory. We are hiring Black people, we're hiring women, and Black women found themselves like, well, where the fuck do I exist? Like the whole Sojourner Truth, ain't I a woman kind of thing. So intersectional feminism came from that, was from her work. Me, when I'm saying intersectionality, is literally that, where the intersections meet, right? Like when I'm saying, okay, Nazi Germany learned from, Jim Crow America, and it was happening at the
mhm,
same time. Hitler literally traveled to America, got Jim
mhm,
Crow America's race laws, and was like, oh shit, let me go
mhm,
put this and apply this to the white Jews, right? Because,
mhm,
like, when we're talking about the intersections of, there were already Afro Germans, so those were already distinguished, right? Like, okay, color of their skin, distinguished. Romanis, those are distinguishable. White European Jews, not so much. This
yeah,
is when
and we
that
have, yeah,
racialization comes in, and they took Jim Crow race laws, brought them to Germany, started measuring nose, phenotype,
mhm,
skin, this and other,
mhm,
and that's intersectionality. So, like, when
yes,
you're, so the intersectionality is the combined marginalization of women of color. It's, for me, intersectionality is the combined oppression of humanity. We all
mhm,
are in a web of oppression, right? Like where it connects, some of us are closer to the spider. We're gonna get eaten
mhm,
faster.
mhm,
But either way, we're in the web for me.
yeah,
Intersectional feminism has its own definition, which is what I started out with, and you can absolutely go and look for where that term was coined. But intersectionality for me, it's everybody, not
mhm,
it's every person, being, trees, the way we live our life that impacts the earth. It's where it all meets for me.
yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy when we talk about the Holocaust and don't include everybody that was in it, because when you look at everything that happens all together, then you can see how all of those different facets were ways of upholding white supremacy. Like all of those different, even, you know, like every single, including the political descendants, you know, including the people that were communists, you know, that it's all of it was something that was being, so yeah, so it's like, it's kind of like, it is that. So it's like we're looking at
you can message me and we could like have a whole other conversation about it. Think about like an intersection, right? You come to a 4-way stop sign, who goes first, the kind of thing, right? That road, those 4 roads, like intersectionality, no, intersectional feminism is for women. Intersectionality is for the world and life.
yes.
It's where everything converges, like right here.
Yeah.
It meets.
Yeah.
It's all gonna meet in the middle. Like if
Yeah.
we really are telling our stories and sharing these conversations, it's all gonna meet at the middle, some way, somehow.
Yeah.
The way we treat the earth, the way we treat other humans, the way we treat races, the way we created race, the way that we hate men, the way that we hate women, the way that we hate trans people, the way that we, it all will converge.
It all connects.
And that's intersectionality.
100%. 100%. And that's what's interesting, where it's like every single level of this needs to be looked at, and how it upholds, you know, white supremacy out as it upholds all of these things. And I know one what was I, one of those things that, like, what I thought was really interesting, I recently saw a video where someone was talking about, Topology is really good. I really love her account, where there's like you can take different pathways to get to white supremacist content on TikTok. Where, you know, you have like, you can just go through do anti-trans content. You have, you know, see one anti-trans video, you like it, you know, you see another one, within like a week you are also within content that's anti-Black, that's anti-Semitic, that's, you know, all of these things. Thank you so much for joining. So it's really interesting to see how and I was like, this is such an interesting, like, there's a lot of ways to interpret like what that data was saying, but one of the things that like I was I think the most like interested by is how, you know, you can take the oppression of one person, go down that path, and then be, you know, have an array of different prejudices, end up with an array of different prejudices, and becoming super right wing. So that's what I think is really interesting too about just like QAnon in general, is like this kind of this which is, and that's what's driving me. That's what drives me crazy. And I know that there's only a couple accounts that, you know, talk about the anti-Semitism of QAnon. People don't have to be literal Nazis to be white supremacists. You know,
right? Just like people don't have to be like, people think that they have to be Klan members to be racist, and I'm like, that's not how it works.
No. And it's like, you know, there are these. It is a modernization of anti-Semitic tropes, which goes along with anti-Blackness, that goes along with anti-indigeneity. They're also espousing, you know, the QAnon is not here, you know, just coming after Jewish people. That's a part of a much larger project that they have. They support Trump and his anti everyone that's not white because things. So
and anti everybody. Let me tell you something. Anti everybody's not rich and white. Nobody hates poor white people more than rich white people. They hate them so much, because like I remind people about that. I'm like, they hate y'all so much they literally named you trash. Right? Like, so like they still give you their identity and this idea of like your privilege, right? But you're white, and that's like, so
oh my
it's
gosh,
not even loyal to you. It literally thinks that because if you are underneath this bar, you're trash. Like, and you're upholding that. Like, that's not, like, white supremacy will leave its entire people that looks like them behind. You left your family behind because you got a house in the suburbs. So, like, your mom is now trailer trash, like, or something. Like, nobody hates white people, poor white people more than rich white people. So, like, these Trump things are like pro cis hetero rich white. Very, very real.
And one of my this is something I've been like kind of thinking on, and I want to do more research on this, and that is really just the way that you know, impoverished white people are demonized by by people saying that like, you know, they're the ones that are the most racist, that like that the less money you have makes you more racist and more ignorant and less educated and all these things. When you have these histories of coal miners in Appalachia, of all of people that have, you know, fought for just have been fighting capitalism. You know, they've been forever. And you see it on like in like the character of the hillbilly, that kind of that trope where you see it in like the Taylor Swift video for somebody just brought it up to me because I didn't realize it the first time I saw it, but like the Taylor Swift video where she's like it's like about like gay pride and everything, and the people,
so I don't know. I'll have
so there's this video, and she has like a few different like, you know, queer icons with her, and they're talking about like, you know, being proud and things like that, and it is a dramatization of, they have like protesters on the side, and the protesters are all wearing plaid, and they're wearing jeans, and they're like holding up signs and shouting, and it's like, it's so common, like where we demonize people when they want to imitate a racist person, they'll put on a Southern accent, they'll put on like, you know,
listen, let's talk about
so
that,
messed
up. I'm from the north, and
mm-hmm.
my husband is a whole Southern boy, so y'all forgive me out now, but the country bumpkin, like how we are not educated, we are indoctrinated. Even education is a form of indoctrination. Like, because as soon as I heard, and I live in the South now, but as soon as I heard a Southern accent, I was like, they're an idiot. Like, it just was like, and that is like so classist, so Northerner, such a Yankee thing to do, right? And I was like, oh, this person has zero fucking sense, because you just like, you do get this trope, like, right? Like this uneducated, poor Southerner marrying their cousins, this, that, and you get all of these things play out, right? Like, I'm going to be doing something, I don't know where, when, or how, but I have it on my whiteboard. Like, can we actually talk about like those unconscious biases that we hold, right? Like, that just happened in an instant, right? Like, and it's okay to talk about them. Like, that was fucking terrible, and I had to unpack that, right? Like, you hear that accent, or you hear a name, or you see a person, and you those things right there, when that first response comes up, you should know that that's your programming. If you hear somebody's name and it gives you a story about who that person is, if you see someone and you get a story about that person, if you hear how they speak and you get a story about that person, that is indoctrination. That's what they want. And they never want you to question that indoctrination. They want you to believe that story is the truth, and that is your solid fact. And that is something to take away from this all, is like, if you hear a Jewish name and you have a whole fucking trope about Jews, that's your indoctrination. If you see a black man and you grab your purse, that is an indoctrination, right? If you hear Maria and you think of a Spanish maid, you're indoctrination. If you hear an accent and I'm doing this, that, and the third, and you think I'm ghetto, that is your indoctrination. Unpack all of that shit. Carry on.
Oh no, it's so true. I think like I remember, I don't remember who it was, but I think it was one of my sisters. So like an acquaintance of my sister was just talking. He was like, "Oh, I don't like Southern people," and we were like
the whole under the Mason-Dixon line, every single person.
They're like it's amazing. It's amazing how when you get into like a certain area of like, you know, of kind of liberal and like and privileged Northeast, where they see the South as, and this is actually something that you see all the time. It's everywhere, where people see the South as just, you know, only like, you know, this specific type of racism that like we don't have up here. Or it's like,
you know what? Coming from both places, it is a little bit different, right?
So,
like,
as
a New Yorker, certain things are blatant and in your face, right? Like, we're not the bless your heart people. We are go fuck yourself people, right? Like, period, point blank, full stop. So I think that may be it. Not saying because like we're all living under white supremacy, but I think that it's just the covert ways that it exists down here.
And I don't mean to say at all that like there aren't, you know, huge differences too. And like, and,
Thank you, Robin.
you know, and also like, you know, just different, you know, experiences that can be, that are, you know, that it's difficult, more difficult to exist for some people in the South and in the North, and things like that. I mean, like, but one thing that I feel like we see a lot is like this complete like writing off of, especially just of like the people that are doing activism in the South, like the people that have been fighting this whole time. And
And
the
there are
people
so
that,
many leftists in the South.
yes,
And like they're usually,
yes,
I love Appalachian culture personally. It's a dope mixture. I mean, it makes sense because of the
yeah,
people that they come from.
yeah,
So like I personally like Appalachian
yeah, yeah,
culture because they go fucking hard
yeah,
and they don't care. And
yeah,
those are my people. Like
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And it's true. It's
those
like,
I like the Southerners.
it's not that like, and it is true, like the South in a lot of ways is absolutely like more dangerous in a lot of ways. I think like a lot of it comes from this understanding of, I don't know, something I've been like turning over in my head a lot is just like blaming, uh it's like looking at racism as something that like you can pin to a type of a person rather than like a governmental structure, and governmental
Right.
structures that will uphold it through indoctrination, through you know, voting laws, and things like that, where it's like it's just, so it's, I don't know, it's kind of like mind boggling to me,
Yeah.
the
I
whole
think
thing.
I think as people we could uphold white supremacy, but we need to
Yeah,
recognize that white supremacy is a structure, like you said,
right,
right? Like
right,
it
right,
is an absolute structure that is upheld by us as people
right.
and anybody, right? Like because we could be like anybody can uphold white supremacy. You don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
you benefit from white supremacy if you're white, and
Right,
benefit for me is a loose ass term, right?
right,
But like you benefit in and let me. You benefit from white supremacy if you're white, and the only way you benefit by it is not culturally or humanely. You benefit you benefit it. You benefit from it because it's a systemic structure. So you
mm-hmm.
benefit from the systems put in place for white people through white supremacy, right? Because
Yeah,
even for me, I remember being in my sociology class and I had a black professor, and I think on who I was then, and I fucking cringe, and I'm admitting this now on
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's on the internet, so it's there forever. But like I could not understand white privilege. Like he was trying to
Right.
explain it, and I was like, no, that's not real. Like, and I went through all of the stories. I was like, that's not real. My grandparents were immigrants. They were in
Mm,
the projects. They raised their
mm-hmm.
kids. Like, you know, and like, so my origin story of like being a proud American is an immigrant story, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't tell me like black people didn't have benefits because my father's side of the family is lit. They're educated lawyers, doctors. My grandmother, who came from the South, owns her apartment in the Bronx. Like she was a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Like you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't. So I could not wrap my mind around it because again, like I think what you're trying to say is like I kept putting it onto people, like
Mm-hmm.
not a system, not a structure.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
no, these people don't, right? Like and mine
Yeah,
now you're. But you say that you're like my black family is doing very fucking well, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
we have to stop looking at it as a people thing and looking at it as a governmental structure thing. And
yeah,
as people, we uphold it or we dismantle it. That's the only
yeah,
thing that we have the powers to do.
yeah, yeah. And one, it's so true. And like this is one thing where especially, I don't know, one, the reason that I look into I study architecture so much and I'm so interested in it, and the ways that that white supremacy is upheld in architecture is that it what's interesting to me is that it's not so much, it's like every, some of them
Amen.
were, but hello, so it's not that like, and that was something that like I was talking with my friend yesterday, it's not that every architect that is upholding white supremacy through their work is at home like rubbing their hands together being like, how am
Right.
I going to enact racism today? It's like, it's it's, but their actions do but in many ways their actions still will still do that because of the
That's why
structure.
the unlearning is necessary because we've all been
Yes.
so indoctrinated in it. Like I said, you don't have to be white to uphold it. I
Yeah.
upheld white supremacy in ways in my what I just said right now, right? Like sitting there 18 in sociology class, I was like, nah, white privilege ain't real. That's absolutely upholding white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Black as fuck
Mm-hmm.
sitting there like, nah, you're bugging.
Mm-hmm.
Telling a
Mm-hmm.
whole black man professor, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like think about all the layers in that. Like think about how
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
asserting my own privilege
Yeah.
in that space. And like this man is a professor like for 40 something years and he's looking at me
Yeah.
like, I wish I could kick this kid's
Oh,
ass.
oh my gosh. And I've known like, and in ways in the past, like just speaking to like my identity, like where I like fed into anti-Semitic tropes where I was like, here on TikTok even, and people had to be like,
Yeah, you want to back that up? Oh yeah, I've been checked on certain things, and I'm like, wait, whoa, shit, that was. But that is
yeah,
why the unlearning aspect.
yeah, it's
Oh,
that
somebody said
unlearning
they
aspect.
got you got them to look into architecture books,
Oh,
and
thank
they
you.
named your page.
The
Yeah.
one I'm reading right now is Race and Modern Architecture. It's by, which I think that like anyone that's interested in this topic should be reading, by Irene Chang, Charles L. Davis the second, and Mabel O. Wilson. And one of the things that like what is fascinating, it's a collection of essays from a lot of different professors. It was put out I think like last year actually, so it's very new. Um, and that's one of the things where it's like it's not so much that every single architect is doing it very consciously, although some are, some
Yes.
definitely are. But we have like what you see is, and this is where you see like in politics too and everything, the presence of people like Philip Johnson, who was a Nazi architect, who was the head of the Museum of Modern Art Architecture program for years and years and years. And his name is still on the wall. And wow. and we there was a group called the Philip Johnson Collective that was trying to get it, to get it off. And this was in 2020. That was saying, you guys need to take this down. They have not taken it down. They've covered it like, relatively like, a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, oh my gosh, you guys, thank you. But we what's interesting to me is not just the presence of Philip Johnson, but the comfortability of everybody else around him, being so comfortable with his presence and so fine with that. And so he was very, and we have people like Le Corbusier, who was a fascist. He was anti-Semitic. He was a racist. He was all of these things. Le Corbusier, but what's interesting is that his history was kind of covered up by the French Academy. Like they tried to make him look like a liberal or whatever. But for both of them, there is that comfortability with the entire architecture community, saying, being fine with white supremacy, and because like they were not interested at taking that down. And then it's a range from the people that are like outright, bigoted, and have like there's these theorists that are still read in architecture schools today, and not always critically. You have those guys who are outright racist, and then you have everybody else who's like, yeah, but it was a different time.
Yeah, like casual racism and casual. It's like I want people to think about that, right? Like, because we do, like, because. So I also deal in like energy work, right? Like, so when things become so binary, right? Like right, wrong, good, bad, black, white, straight, gay. Like when everything is just like we're missing all of this spectrum in between, right? Like, mm-hmm. So it's like, oh well, no, like I said, like in order to be considered a racist, like, and I'm like. So what would you call the people that like sat around while all of this was happening, right? And yes. I often I'm a shock values person, right? And since we've all been indoctrinated to care about the Holocaust, because many don't, you just know about it, but you're not really interested in the Jewish people or their plight. But since we've been indoctrinated to care about the Holocaust, I'm like, okay, so what were the people doing when the train was going by? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hold them accountable too. Mm-hmm. Like they are accountable as well, right? Yeah. There was somebody driving that train. There was somebody loading that train up. There was mm-hmm. somebody working in the gas mines, but there was a bunch of you motherfuckers letting that train go by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what are people doing now too. What are people doing now that are standing by? You know,
Right.
as
Like
every
you
as
are complicit
yeah,
in somebody else's oppression. If you
yeah,
don't say something, if you don't do something, and not everybody can put their bodies in the way. That's
right,
not a suggestion of mine, right? Like
right,
I'm not a person that's going to go out in the streets. That's not me because I'm going to
right.
end harmed or jailed, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not a price I'm willing to pay. This is
Mm-hmm.
my level of activism, and then like what I do outside of these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But like everybody should be doing something.
Right.
I'm willing to pay. This is
Mm-hmm.
my level of activism, and then like what I do outside of these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But like everybody should be doing something.
Right.
Like
Right.
everybody
Absolutely.
should be doing something, and that's where that intersectionality for me comes in again, right?
Yeah.
Like we're all concerned about somebody else, right? Like
Right.
I'm concerned about you, I'm concerned about me. I'm going to secure my own oxygen mask first, which I
Mm-hmm.
suggest for everybody to do, right? Like that's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that's why that's another reason for me, like allyship is weird. I'm not asking you to unpack and re-traumatize yourself, because if you're looking
Right.
at white supremacy from a trauma care point, right? Like, and a trauma informed point, is then you need a safe space to unpack that, right? Like you need to feel safe, you need to feel in community to share those things. Like every time I post a TikTok and I get like these thousands of comments from white people, I'm like, wow, they have
Mm-hmm.
so much. They're just like, well, since you asked, right? And I'm like, yeah, like unburden yourself of that. What we don't
Yeah.
talk about, what we don't speak on, what we don't confront, we can't heal, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's like it's a very important thing, to your point, to not just look at like I have to be out here using like the K word and wearing a fucking symbol to be
Mm-hmm.
anti-Semitic. No, it could be somebody left a comment about the Kabul of, and I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't notice it. Somebody brought it to my attention, so I deleted it because I wasn't even going to
Yeah.
respond to it. Because then
Yeah.
that just like fuels it. But it's
Yeah.
that those small
Yeah.
things is like no, no,
It's
no,
no, no.
no.
And it's something, and actually I wanted to acknowledge this, like from a little bit back, that we were talking about, like, you know, just about how we present when we're talking, like on TikTok. I know that, like, as like, since I'm white, if I bring up these topics of race and racism, you know, people will, it becomes it becomes more palatable. And like, I know that, like,
Mhm.
I get, you know, once in a while it'll be, you know, one of those horrific, like, anti-Semitic comments, but but I know that, like, my comment section is not the same experience, as it would be if I was, you know, a woman of color, like, putting that stuff out there.
Yeah,
And that's something that is, but what's so interesting too is the the um the amount of comments that I get, saying the same thing, which is that, you know, it's not that deep. This question, it's not that deep, or like, you, like, stop making everything about race, or like, you know,
it was literally created.
it was created
Like,
this way.
it was
And
created. Everything was created based on
yeah,
race. Like, so like when like that for me is like cognitive dissonance. As
yes,
soon as somebody tells me that, I'm like, then you don't really want to do this work,
you
right?
don't
Like,
want to know.
because you don't want to know. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and just say that and like get the
Right.
fuck move around. Like
Yeah.
you don't really want to know them, because everything is based on race. Like that
Right.
is white supremacy. So like
Right.
the dissonance for me to be like, yeah, like we're gonna dismantle the patriarchy. Like, okay, well that you know how that was created too, right? Like,
Right.
you know, inside of the patriarchy is white supremacy, is capitalism. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to turn around and talk about we're not getting a living wage and not acknowledge that there was free labor that built this fucking country. So hi,
Yeah.
your $7.25 an hour is looking really fucking good, ancestrally speaking. So
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, like
It's
you gotta
it's
want to do
you
the
can
work.
tell. What's interesting to me is, like, I feel like there's so many comments, that you see on videos that are trying to deconstruct racism, that what they're saying is, I don't feel like doing this. I don't want to do this work.
Yeah,
You
just
know,
say
I don't.
that
Just say
and
that.
go.
just say,
Just say
just say
that
that.
and
Say,
move the fuck around, so I can
yeah.
get to people that want to do this work and
Yeah.
create something better for us all. Because
Yeah.
like I said, I'm pro liberation and like anti oppression. So
Right.
like if that does not resonate with you, then just move along.
Yeah. 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 And what's interesting too is like
Did I
when,
sound?
oh, can you hear me? Hold on.
I
Did the
can hear
sound
you. Can
somewhere?
you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
But what I think is interesting too is just like the reaction when you show somebody, like when somebody shows the underlying structure of racism, that a lot of that people will react with that, like that rage, that like I don't want, you know, that this like extreme emotional reaction where it's like I feel like I've learned so much in the last year, like being so like
Yeah.
you know, watching people how they react to these things. I feel like I've learned so much in how people, you know, how people will, you know, yeah, what they'll say, and what they mean. And I used to, I know, like it's in the beginning, I was taking this stuff like much more personally than than I do now, where you start to notice patterns of like
Yes.
what people are saying. And you're like, oh, okay, that means that means that. It's like, you know, and they're not actual arguments. They're not actually based
So glad you were here.
on, you know, they're not yeah, thank you. They're not actually you know, bringing in some type of history that counteracts. Because like when we're talking, you know, we're just, you know, sometimes it's interesting and sometimes it's even like, you know, we'll put out something that's just history and
Yeah.
people will be like, that's an interesting take. And it's like, it's not a take. It's not an
Yo,
opinion.
oh my God. So when I first got on here and I was talking about like colonization, and I was like, you know,
Mhm.
well, you know, white people need to dismantle this because like you colonize yourselves first. So like any
Mhm.
group of people that would do this harm to themselves, like if you could take a you and like feed
Mhm.
it to lions for entertainment, feeding
Mhm.
my children to alligators means nothing to you.
Mhm.
And like I was
Mhm.
like, you know, because like, you know, Europe colonized Europe first. And this guy literally was like, Europe colonized Europe. That's a take. I was like,
It's not a take. It's not a
oh,
take.
where the fuck am I right now? Like, I'm like, what fucking dimension did I just slide into? Because it's obviously 2 levels from hell.
Yeah. It's
People
so
are wild.
true.
People are
It's
wild.
so true.
People are
It's
wild.
so true.
I was
It's so
like,
true. People
take.
will say like, people will say the wildest things where it's like, this is such a terrible opinion. And it's like,
It's not
I
an
didn't,
opinion.
it's not an opinion. I'm just telling you stuff that happened. I'm just telling you shit that happened. Like it's not any of that. And you know, and once in a while sometimes we'll say the opposite. People will be like, this is a great take, and I don't wanna, I'm like, I don't wanna, you know, say, you know, be mean about it, but like this is not
It's not a
it's not a
take. It's
take.
not a take. And it's like,
Everyone thinks that like when you put out a video on the internet, that you're putting out some like opinion that no one's thought of before. And
yeah,
like honestly, like I want to stop, like, and I've tried to like change a little bit the way that I've changed the way that I make videos a lot and present a lot over the year. Because I think I did used to be a lot more like takey. I used to be like, listen to
well,
this
here's my
crazy
ideas and
idea.
thoughts on this, right? Like, and so, but
Yeah.
I think part of that though is like, so like I do decolonization work. So that means like
Mm-hmm.
stripping down every fucking thing that you ever thought was real. It's all a lie, right?
Yeah.
So like the truth of the matter is like, I prefer Socratic learning style, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's what you bring. Like, oh, that's interesting. And then I will go and look further into it. I never took it as takes, right? Like
Uh-huh.
you came across my FYP and I was like, yo, this is enlightening and it makes so much sense. I'm being a New Yorker. Yes, we do actually always drop that whenever we can. um,
Yes.
like the
I love it. I
architecture
love it.
there, it is true. It's true. Yeah. Like being a New Yorker, yep, all the time, wherever I can, as long as I can. Like being from the Bronx. Yep. But no, like the architecture there and the gargoyles and all of that stuff is like something so beautiful to me. Like I love the architecture. So like just like learning from you, I'm like, oh, wow, oh, wow. And when you really just accept the fact, like, because that's what it is like it's just an
Mm-hmm.
acceptance. Like, and it's not an indictment. that's what I need, especially white people, to move through.
Yeah.
Acceptance that white supremacy exists is not an
Yes.
indictment on you as a human
Yes.
being. It is a
Yes.
system. It is like saying a toilet is used to shit. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
And that's
literally just that factual. It's not saying anything about you. It's saying this is the system. What are you going to do about it?
yeah,
Like,
100%. 100%. And that's what I think is so interesting about
I love that they're
the
having
last
like
the
their own conversations in the whole comments. I'm
ah!
looking, they're like all sharing all of this different information. I'm like, oh,
I
I have to
love
go
it.
through this.
um I so one thing I know that like that's what's so interesting about like I don't mean to it's what when people talk about cancel culture or things like that, it gets so complicated because like
I hate cancel culture.
I hate the whole idea.
Hate
But
it.
like one thing that is so interesting is that the choice of a lot of, for example, like a lot of streaming services to just delete episodes of shows,
I'm
or
like,
even like
hi,
yeah
have you guys heard of burning libraries? That's why you didn't know Afro Germans existed. That's why you didn't know about the Pink Triangle.
yeah
That's why you don't know about the massacres inside of, like, the
yeah
United States against Black people. Like,
yeah
changing history is actually that. It's not knocking
yeah
down the Confederate statue. It is taking books out of school. Like, we don't teach
right
those books because it has those words. Yeah, it meant I'll take an N word over you saying Africans were fucking immigrated over here to work like they
yeah
did in Texas, right? Like they
yeah
literally shifted history like the Daughters of the Confederates did way back when. So
yeah
it's like,
it's the same thing, brushing things under, it's just brushing things under the carpet, it's just
mhm.
making things prettier, and not holding space to, and
Don't
it's
we
the
want
same.
Trump canceled? I'll get into that in a second. I'll answer that.
And that's the same thing of what's happening by just suspending Whoopi for 2 weeks, by just by quote unquote like just just covering, like just silencing and covering and all of these things, things that like are also they're just elements of like this the the punishment system that we've set up here, where, and it's the same thing where like if content creators, and a lot of content creators are yeah, consequences are not cancellation. I think that's very true. I think that there
It's
are
lazy
these
activism.
lines in between.
It's lazy. It's
It
lazy as
is.
fuck.
And if there are these lines where it's so weird, where like people will say the wrong thing, and sometimes they really are wrong, and people will come to them, and the best outcome is when they have an active conversation. They talk about what's the problem and everything like that. On the other hand, sometimes you have people saying things, people will sometimes accuse someone of doing something wrong, and then will kind of engage in this punishment system and not like a learning system. And I'm in a weird words. But I don't and that I feel like, and that's what's so complicated, is that like it's every situation is different too. But what
Right.
ends up happening
That part.
in the last couple of weeks, and I look at this a lot with museums, with like what museums will do, is like have all of these initiatives and committees and all of these things where it's like, okay, well, let's talk about how you didn't think about this until now. Like, let's talk about like how this wasn't a thing until 2020. This was not on your radar. And
No.
if you're actually gonna talk about your diversifying efforts, you have to think about the very columns of this institution at a huge art museum. What created this? How many hundreds of years? What kind of patrons? Who is on your board? And how is that actually going to change? There are
This
so
is
many
new
ways.
Rome. This is Rome. This is Rome all over again. Like,
Ugh.
this is Rome. And I'm like, y'all do
Uh-huh.
know that Rome never fell, right? It just was rebranded. Like, why the fuck did we even learn Roman numerals? Like,
Yes.
why?
Yes.
Why the
Yes.
fuck do I need to know numbers of Rome?
For real.
Why in our
Yeah.
laws are things called Roman statutes? Why do I need to
Yes.
know that? This
Yes.
is Rome all over again.
Yeah.
Why is it the Colosseum? Why is it the Olympics? Like, I
Yeah.
ask all of that. I'm like, This is
Yeah.
fucking Rome. This is new
Yeah.
Rome. Like
Yeah.
America is Rome all
Yeah.
over again. Rome is never
Yeah.
fallen. It is always rebuilding.
Yeah.
So for me, that's how I look at it. And like I like, again, from like an energetic, magical, like speaking like that statement, all roads lead to Rome. I fucking believe that is so indelible.
Yeah.
Like this is Rome. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, why is this called the Olympics? Like literally those are I'm
It's
like,
Rome. And
it's Rome.
and white white nationalists and white nationalists within the classics in academia and the classics absolutely believe that 1000% that they are in the lineage of Roman greatness, of
Holy
Roman
fuck.
greatness and imperialism. And I it drives me, and that's why you see that there was that outrage when that one classics professor suggested that not all Romans were white people, and that whiteness is a whole different thing than what people were then and who they were, but also the statues being brightly colored, and our the architecture being brightly colored, and there being graffiti all over the walls, and there being and that doesn't change the facts that Rome was also is also admired for its imperialism, its colonization, um, but it makes it more complicated when you threaten the idea that Rome was about the greatness of white people, which it's a whiteness wasn't really invented. So
yeah, but it evolves,
yeah.
right? Like you don't
Yeah.
come out of a small town and start conquering people and not think of how you're going to gain. Like I think that also. I love how this conversation has evolved to so many other
Me
things.
too.
Right? Like,
Me too.
but that's what I'm saying. It's an evolving conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think that we think about. I just don't think we think enough. First of all, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't get capitalism does not give us time to think, right? Like way back when everybody was a philosopher, right? Like all you had was time to pontificate and wonder and be the great thinker, right? Like, and capitalism just doesn't allow us the time to fucking breathe, let alone like think critically or even just think expansively.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't even need to be critical, right? And then they tell you like unless I'm writing a thesis about something, I don't need to think that deeply, right? And I'm like, like no, that's not true.
This is one of my things where once in a while, you'll see somebody like question the credentials of a creator, and they'll come back and be like, and this is something that I've kind of been a little bit guilty of in the past, being like, oh yeah, I've done this and this and this in the past. I've done, I've worked in all these organizations, all this shit. And now I'm like, next time someone's like, who are you to speak on this? I'm just a human being. Like, I'm just a person on the internet. I can say whatever. Yeah.
I'm me.
I'm me.
That's who the fuck I am. Me.
Right.
That's your answer. Me.
Right.
Me. A person who thinks. Like me.
I used to be so pressured. I think this is something I still have ingrained in me and that I'm kind of working with, is like this idea that I need to get another degree before I like write a book.
Please don't go into more debt. Like just don't go into more debt, right? Like that's all. When people tell me that, I'm like, why are you going into debt? Like, right?
Yeah.
Like on top of that, like if you like education, I'm not against formal education at all, right? Like, but there's like tons of stuff. I take classes all the time, like .edx or some shit, like Harvard classes. And if you don't pay you to get the certificate, you're still getting the education and the learning and the exposure. And like the thing is like that is why very much my brand, like with the whole makeshift happen, is about like every day, right? Like podcast, let's have the conversation, like because I'm so fucking tired of defaulting to like, well, what did this expert say? And white supremacy loves to read a fucking book. I don't have the fucking time to make change in the world if I have to fucking read a whole ass book before I make a decision. I can talk to people who are having lived experiences and base a thought on that. And then my thought can evolve from that, right? Because like I said, at 18, I did not believe in white privilege. At 40, almost 3 in April, I'm like, white privilege is the benefit of the doubt. There goes the easy breakdown if you want it, right? Like, because I'm not about to go and have this whole dissertation back and forth with you. White privilege exists. It's the benefit of the doubt. And because we live in a binary energetic space, if somebody's given the benefit of doubt, who gets to assume the worst? That would be us.
Mm-hmm.
If you see a white man on the side of the road with a flat, you assume gee willikers, he probably broke down. You see my
Mm-hmm.
black ass husband with his gold teeth and tattoo, you're like, this nigga done stole the car. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's white privilege in a nutshell, right? So, like, when we're able to have these conversations and, like, literally talk to people with their lived experiences, like I said, I love, like, the separate conversation that's happening in the comments, right? Like, they're like, oh, Google this, and here's this YouTube video, and here's this. And it's like,
The
yeah,
best.
like that,
It's the
right?
best.
Like somebody asked and they were like, oh, thank you for policing me. Thank you for checking that. I'm not policing you. I'm just letting you know what I'm witnessing. That's conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
that is what white supremacy isolates us. And white privilege
Mm-hmm.
is literally as simple as it's the benefit of the doubt. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
need a dissertation. Who said it? Me.
Yeah.
Tell them I said it. Who said it? Dad
I
said
said
it.
it.
Tell them I fucking said it.
Absolutely.
Send them here.
Absolutely.
I said it.
Yeah. People, and so that's one of the things
Wild.
that people will, and I think more at the beginning, there'll be like, oh, you're posing yourself as like an expert at all these things. And
I'm
an
expert in what I know. Like, that's how
right.
I look at it. It's like, I'm an expert in what I know, right? Like, there's
I'm
certain
an expert in
conversations
me.
I'm not going to turn around and talk about architecture, but what it does is like it sparks something, right? Because like I said, when I saw your page, I was like, ooh, I wonder if she has one on gargoyles because those are so cool to me.
Oh my gosh.
In New York, right? Or like when you were talking about, I think our first interaction between you and I was about the shotgun houses. And I was like, we have some in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, I didn't know. I was like, yeah. So like, here's the story of like that shotgun house. And then you went on and made a few videos with that. And then we were talking and then like you stitched me on the air conditioning. I was like, well, we have air conditioning because white people came and killed all the indigenous people who knew how to live here. So now we have to make shit to consume. And like, and then we just, here we are now today.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but
what's amazing is that there's all these conversations, and what's amazing is that, and one of my mistakes in that air conditioning video was saying that all of that they killed every indigenous person, when that's something, of course, is so far from the truth.
Right.
And we have indigenous architects that are doing this amazing work with ventilation, and that is so.
It's almost like if you don't kill all the people that know how to live or enslave people, because it's like, like somebody said earlier with the Romans, like astronomy, archaeology, spirituality all existed in the continent of Africa before they got their asses there. And like when you start murdering people and stealing and taking culture, now we're backpedaling. Like I look at America and I'm like, y'all did all of this motherfucking killing to still not know how to do anything. And now you're like backpedaling. To figure it out. Oh shit, we need water filtration. Really? Because I feel like the indigenous would have been able to tell you that if you wasn't out there trying to kill them. You know what I mean? Like, we need to understand, like, y'all still don't know how the pyramids were built. But you killed the people and you fucking trafficked them out of the country from the people that built them. Maybe if you didn't do that, you would know how the fuck they were built. But you're murdering culture, like that structure. It's about so much more, like, and then that leads into like reparations and stuff. For me, it's not only about physical labor, it's intellectual property as well. What do you take from people when you take people? When you strip culture, when you strip language, you strip their knowledge. Not only knowledge of self, but knowledge that can be shared, that can be exchanged, right? Like bringing it all the way back to this conversation and back to my intersectionality. When you only place a white face on Jewish people, America, you strip their story. You're not protecting them. Like a white passing Jew is not more protected because of that. To the contrary, they're more hated now, right? Because as a marginalized group inside of America still, it's like, why are they getting more attention? Why are they getting more care? Why do they have protections? Why is it a crime to harm Jews, but not a crime? And now we're having the wrong fucking conversation. I don't want Jews to not be protected. I want Black people to be protected, right? Like, I don't want to be like, nah, the Jews got, protection. So a couple of Asians got, harmed, and now there's an anti-Asian bill. I don't care about that. We're having the wrong conversation. can we get some federal protection too?
Mm-hmm.
Because y'all
Mm-hmm.
are still killing us. Y'all are lynching us still, right? Like that 72-year-old woman was hung from a tree. You think a 70 black woman, 72 years old, who would have been alive during lynchings, said, I think I'm going to climb up here and do this to myself. I'm like, so we're just having the wrong conversations for me. Like, we need to be shifting those things, because when you steal from a people, you steal so much more. You are taking identity, you are taking history, you are taking knowledge. And there's no way to replace that unless people are insular, where you get like, you know, Amish groups or Appalachian groups or Jewish groups. And those people are insular. And then like Jewish people often know their stories unless they're hella Americanized.
Right.
I will say that. Like if you're Americanized and you're a Jew, then you probably don't, because now you've been indoctrinated into Americanness, right?
Yeah.
But like if you live a Jewish life, and which is why I was confused on Jews being a race. Because for me, like I said, like all of the Jews that I've ever been exposed to in my life, they live a Jewish lifestyle. Like it's a whole lifestyle. It's a whole way of being, a way of speaking, a way of thinking, a way of moving culturally as an entire people. So I was like, they can't be a race. That doesn't it does not compute for me.
It doesn't compute. And it is true. Like that's something I see that someone was saying, calling white Jews white, a racist complexity. And I think
passing Jews. Usually I say white passing, so I apologize.
Oh no, but I actually like, I kind of disagree, because like I think this is just my perspective. You know, a lot of people say different things. It's just that like, because you know what I think that that our the discussion of our Jews, it's okay. This is really complicated.
No, I don't. That's not the conversation we're having. Somebody says our Jews white. Jews are not white to me.
That's not the conversation that we're having.
That's not the conversation at all.
But what I think a lot of people have been missing in this conversation through Whoopi Goldberg, is the fact that you know, like for me, like I do have privilege. Like I do have that white privilege. And I think I need to be active and thinking
you are
about
both
that.
Hold on, because Robin, you are both. Like that is what race does. That's what, like when I bang out on my TikTok, white supremacy erases, it doesn't care about your ethnicity, it doesn't care about your culture, doesn't care about your language, doesn't care about your lived truth, right? Like I said, like I grew up culturally Irish American. My grandmother moved here as an adult, not like young, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh yeah, we're Irish, we came on the Mayflower. Like my grandmother was 30, my entire family before that, like my mother's a first generation American. I'm still black. Right? Like, but now that doesn't take away my ethnicity. That doesn't take away my culture. That doesn't take away what I grew up doing.
Right.
How I move now internally. But externally, the way the world perceives me within the system of white supremacy, I'm going to be treated a certain sort of way.
Yeah.
So it's like, you could be you're a white presenting Jew at best, right? It's not to call you white.
It's not to say that
I'm not trying to erase your Jewishness. Like,
it's not to say that complexity isn't there and that difference isn't there. And like, and you know, we're treated as different. I'm treated as different all the time. You know, it's not that complexity.
Exactly. Somebody said being white passing, no matter who or what, gives you certain, because there's like Passe Blanc. I follow this creator here, and I think that's actually his tag, and he is white presenting, but he's a black man, right? And like, so he goes through the whole story of like Passe Blanc and what that means to the black community, those that were coming, you know, like in between, able to give information back and forth between these two groups, right? Where you can kind of move in, but then that also, so here's the wild thing, and intersectionality. So Passe Blanc within black communities, when we were able to, not we, because I was never going to be able to pass for, maybe now because white women are blackfishing, but like when you were like in those days when you were able to be white passing, you were utilized within your community to move through those spaces and come back and tell us. But like, look how fucked up white supremacy is. So while that was beneficial
Wow.
to us as a Black community, those were sneaky Jews. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hi, we're all fucked up together. Like that, like,
Yeah.
so a white passing Jew, now it's supposed to be a good thing. But before, that's literally, right? Like the tropes, if you Google tropes about the Jews, and you'll see rats, like they called them rats because they were sneaky and filthy animals. And like,
right.
It's disgusting. The whole point.
Yeah. And it is that sneakiness too. And that's something we were talking about a little bit before.
Oh yeah, it is absolutely. There's a burden. I talk about the burden of privilege because there is a burden to that, because you're not seen. That's the point of white supremacy.
Yeah.
It happens to us as Black people too. That's why y'all make us a monolith, right? Like, oh well, Desiree said that this, so like all Black people should adhere to that because that's it. But that's what white supremacy does. So then it pushes us on either side of the aisle, because I'm going to say, I don't give a fuck about you being Jewish, you're white. And it's like, oh, that's anti-Semitic. So fuck me and my 2,000 years of oppression, because, you know, and like now we're infighting. Mm-hmm. And again, having the wrong conversation. I can see you. I see you. You're Jewish. I understand. I understand the Jewish diaspora. Also understand racism in America and respect my diaspora. So my diaspora says you're white. You can be a white Jewish person. You could be a white passing Jewish person. You could be all of those things. And I won't take away your truth, but understand that the way that white supremacy is set up is to pit us against each other. Yeah. So standing next to me, if slavery came back, because that's our truth in this country, you're not going to get picked. However, if a Jewish Holocaust came back, you would get picked and I wouldn't. Do you see what I mean? Like,
yeah. So it's one of those interesting things.
Why am I talking so much about anti-Semitism when not even Jewish? Isabella's Jewish, and I run my mouth a lot.
Because I'm Jewish and we're here, and that's kind of what we're talking a little bit about right now. And this is something that, you know, it applies in a lot of different ways. That like this is what a conversation that's been happening and from different creators. So I have like friends that are on the app that are Romani, who are indigenous, who are you know, a few different, you know, different peoples that are that, you know, that are white.
Hold on,
you know,
because I don't want that to be. No, I want to interrupt you just because the person said, it sounds like I was explaining it to Isabella. I was explaining it to somebody in the comments, not to Isabella at all. No. Somebody asked a specific question and I was answering because they asked about, but like, I'm white, so I get erased. And since I deal with like what white supremacy looks like, that's what I was talking about. It. Back to you, Isabella.
Yeah. So, so if you haven't actually listened to Romani people, I think it's important that you search out Romani accounts on the app. Florida Florian is a really great account. I'll put that in.
Can you tag them? Because that would be cool.
I can. Let me see if I'll just put it in the chat. This is one account that I think is really good. If you search Florian, you probably will be able to come up. And I think that account will lead you to some other Romani accounts, where because their story has been so suppressed and so erased, and they experience they experience so much hatred and supremacy, and in America, in the U.S., not just in Europe where it is horrible, but in the U.S. right now, there are.
We also wear them like culture, bohemian.
Yeah,
like we wear their culture. Yes, like a fucking. And I was guilty of that. You could not tell me I was not a gypsy. I was not, like, literally. I'm like, my whole aesthetic was like bohemian chic, and I had no idea that was awful.
Yeah. So that account is great. I would say so. Like, one thing I've learned from them is that actually saying the word with G in it is actually like for a lot of people still like a slur, and so that's something. Oh no, yeah. No, a lot of people don't. Nobody knows. A lot of people don't know.
No, I know that it was a slur, but like saying it out loud as if I had the right to just throw it out, even in this moment, is my apology. I don't use it elsewhere, but I'm saying like in the conversation, I shouldn't have just tossed it out there either. Yes,
Yes,
that
it
is
is.
a
It
slur.
is a slur. It is a slur, and that was something that I learned when I said it in a video. Is that I had a couple friends who are Romani who would say like, "Hey, like unless you're Romani yourself, then don't say that word."
Yeah.
And that actually gets really complicated because once you hear when you say that, you will hear people saying that there are some Romani people who refer to themselves that way, or some travelers and Sinti that refer to themselves that way. It is true. In England, I think it's for some people they don't see it as a slur,
And
but
that's fine. Like the same way we use certain words that just you
yeah,
can't use, right? And yeah, when I was in
right,
England, I met travelers and they actually called themselves that. And so like
yeah.
my experience with them was the back and
And it's
forth. So
and there are some, so there's basically different people that will not see it that way, and even won't see it won't see it as bad if a non-Romani person says it. However, I feel like it's just that, like, if anybody considers it a slur, you might as well not. Like, you might, if
like,
anyone
why is
considers
it
it.
such a battle, right? Like, hey, if that
Yeah,
person, then I'm not gonna argue with it, right? Like, okay, cool.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, why is it such a battle? Why is it? And one of the problems, and surrounding this entire situation with the Holocaust, because the Romani and the Sinti are left out, then we understand it in this very different way, in this very wrong way. And one of the things I actually need to make another video about, because not enough people are talking about it. Jimmy Carr, a comedian, at the end of last year, said, in front of a huge crowd, that thousands of Romani people, he actually used, of course, used the G word in there, were murdered, but we don't talk about the positives of the Holocaust. And the crowd was laughing and cheering. The crowd was laughing and
It's
cheering.
like, what?
And it's mind-bogglingly horrible. And this is what's, and it's only resurfacing right now. And the thing is that joke is actually not it's not an original joke. That's something that people, that I've heard that joke before. And it's something that people will say all the time, that it was a positive thing, that they were being ethnically cleansed. And he said that with his whole chest,
Oh
and no
yeah,
one said
no.
anything about it until
When they believe
this
that, they
month.
say it. They believe it. They believe
They
it.
because they absolutely believe it. They
Yeah,
absolutely believe it.
yeah.
And he is just a symptom of a much larger problem that exists, again, here in the US as well. So what's and again, no one said anything about it until now, and still we don't have people saying anything about it. And it's just it's so maddening. It's so maddening. This is what happens when it's normalized, when it is normalized to hate Romani people, when it is absolutely, when we don't know, the incredible amounts of suffering that they continue to go through, and the amount of hate that they receive every single day, and that
An
is
apology
so.
is. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's a good question. Is, when is an apology sufficient? When is it enough? I mean, I think it's what bothers me is that people will say something, then there could be a huge outcry, and then they'll apologize on Twitter, and it's like the next day, and it's like, this is an ingrained, whatever you said. For example, let's say that Jimmy Carr came out and apologized, which he might have apologized. I don't even care. I don't care. That's an ingrained thing that you've learned for years. You do not suddenly realize that it's wrong because someone
No.
told you. You know it's wrong.
Yeah.
You know it's wrong. That's when people put out these types of apologies where it's like, oh, I see why that was wrong now. It's like, you've had time. You're an adult. It's like,
Right. I'm
you
like,
don't get to overnight just erase it.
for me,
Yeah.
that's again punitive, right? Like, it's like, like with the whole like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, but I want to keep learning kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
hounding Black women. I don't know where that one came from, but I think that it takes more than that, right? Like, this conversation could go on for the next like 3 days, and we still
Yeah.
not touch all of the straight and still not touch all of the intersections, all of the
Yeah.
nuance that existed within that one statement. And for
Yeah.
me, it's again going back to like the systems of white supremacy. It did not protect Jewish people. It did not do anything but further polarize, right? Because they used Whoopi and they always use Black people. We always get to be the fucking whipping post, and that pun is intended. Literally to make a point, which just further polarizes us, right? Because I think that Whoopi actually, one, she's problematic as fuck, like I said, since Ted Danson and Blackface. So this is not, I'm a Whoopi Goldberg fan. I think that I had this conversation in Clubhouse last week. I think multiple truths exist within Whoopi being, yes, I do. It really does. Multiple truths exist. One, Whoopi has pushed a lot of fucking envelopes just all the way. And this was just like too damn much. Second, yeah, she's a Black woman. So absolutely able to be put on the chopping block with no protection. So then that forces us as the Black community to like not even need to, I can't be concerned about the Jewish community right now. I need to protect this Black woman because not enough people protect Black women, right? Like it's Black women that protect Black women. So like inside of that protection, other things can get lost too. And for me, like, wanting to have this conversation is like, look, I can protect this Black woman because she's absolutely being utilized and, you know, ostracized easier because she's a Black woman. If Joy would have said something like that, or one of those other chicks, you know, like we had the other lady that was a Trumpian, but like, we already know, like, if we are going to admit and come into alignment that white supremacy is real, then we have to also then admit that Whoopi Goldberg is being punished. Not, for me, here's the key, not because she spoke about Jews, but because Jewish community is a community. It's a very tight community. Not because they're like fucking rich and powerful and some weird Rothschild theory and Kabbalah shit. But they're an actual community of shared values, culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, power in numbers. So they're able to like, hey, this was wrong. Whoopi needs some talking to, you know what I'm saying? And like, so that happens. Because of white supremacy, she's able to be used as an example without people protecting her. Right. And then with people doubling down on their racism. Right. Because then it's like, because a lot of the commentary is like not even attacking Whoopi's lack of knowledge. Like I appreciate the commentary that's going on. Somebody said, I'm a Jewish trans man. I love Whoopi. She always stands up for marginalized communities. Thank you for that. I appreciate that greatly, honestly. So like it just for me it just separates us more, because that was a great time, like you said, right? Like, because the Jewish community is such a community, they could have brought like a rabbi or the ADL or whatever and just had a special view with Whoopi. Like, let's have this conversation.
And so, and that's one thing that I don't know if y'all follow
it was given to her. She didn't need, apparently her mother names her with the last name Goldberg, and it was based on the idea that, you know, Jews are powerful in Hollywood, my daughter will have a better chance. We covered that intersection on, yes, it's anti-Semitic, it's also what's forced on Black people to take on more white names or white looks to survive white supremacy in America. So it's a little bit of both.
Absolutely. And that was one thing that
Robin, duh.
that's one thing that drives me up the wall, is that I don't know if you guys follow Millie Not So Vanilli on here, where she's a Jewish creator who calls out anti-Semitism every day on the app. And the thing is, like, until the, you know, and that's one of the things where it's like the Wild and Winning situation last week. You know, the creator who was talking about, you know, dirty evil Jews, and then the Whoopi situation, we had this outpouring of everybody, you know, all over the app saying, you know, this is so horrible, but it's like, honestly, and at one point it was like, okay, this is, you know, good, like, I'm glad we're talking, but like, this happens every day. This happens every day. People say horrible things. When they push anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. There are white people on this app all over the place, and we try to tell you, we try to talk about it, and it's only that this is happening now that everybody's getting on the bandwagon, and the anti-blackness becomes clear, and that's like this is something that's, it's not just, you know, one or two people saying stuff that's anti-Semitic. You know, it's a very widespread, deeply ingrained problem.
Absolutely.
That we talk about all the time. That, you know, why haven't you said anything until now? You know, why is now are you coming after people? And it's just it's really frustrating, because this is not the way that we should be having this conversation. You know,
No.
this is not the way it should be having, because it only is breeding more hatefulness. And that's why I am so with you on saying this is an evolving conversation. This is not something that's going to be ended this weekend, because
No.
it's something that needs to be talked about at length, and all the different aspects of it. It's not just about condemning one person, or, you know, putting one person out to dry and what the things that they said. People are like what we were talking about before. People are
And they
attacking
love to do that,
people.
right? Because that's what they
Yeah.
make it seem like. And it's like, okay, are we unpacking how insidious anti-Semitism is? And then are we unpacking how insidious racism and anti-blackness is in this country, right? Because like somebody was like, you can't compare the two. We're not looking to compare the two. We're looking to understand how the fuck to survive white supremacy. Nobody, I'm not about to be like, well, we're just saying the different experiences underneath the same thing, right? Like, I have 3 children who live in my house right now. All 3 of them will have a different story of us as parents. Like, doesn't mean that any of their stories are less true, right? I have a 26-year-old daughter from my first marriage that we're estranged, that I shared about on my IG. Her story of it doesn't make my story any less true. We have versions of it that are true. And if we were sharing more of our lived experiences, we would start being able to pinpoint the systems that are the problem, right? Like, I'm not going to be like, well, Isabella, your life is easier, because she should know that. She should know it's just a little bit easier because she's a white passing Jewish person, right? Because she accepts that white supremacy is real. I'm not about to sit down and like, I do things from a trauma informed space. I don't need to re-traumatize her or myself through our people's diaspora or our harm underneath white supremacy. Well, 12 million of us, well, 40 million of us, well, my brother, and well, your cousin. Here, all we're doing is re-traumatizing each other.
Yeah.
We could just turn around and say, hey, Isabella, there's some systems at play here, and I get it. Like, Jews, thousands of years, diaspora, Holocaust, just anti-Semitism is rampant. She could say the same thing back to me, like, Des, get it? You guys are diasporic as well, transatlantic slave trade, living in America with your captors, like racism every day, anti-blackness. What are we going to do about it? And that's where the nuance comes in. We're not trying to compare pain.
No. And it would be unhelpful to do so. I think what's interesting is to look at that's where we're coming back to, like, intersectionality, where you look at, like, yes, it's like, it's, you know, it's almost too simple to almost say, like, it's two sides of the same coin. Now, like, the more I weigh it in my head, because it's like, you know, yes, like, it is important not to compare, but of course to look. So, because it's not, I
think it's a contrast, right?
Yeah.
I think instead of a comparing, it's a contrast. Like, this is your experience under white supremacy. This is my experience under white supremacy. So the misspeaking is literally not a comparison. Well, like, the Jews didn't get it as bad because they weren't black. It is, again, for me, when I heard it, one, like I said, and things evolve. For me, growing up in New York, I told y'all we dropped
in New York.
Growing up in New York. Growing up in New York, one, you get hella anti-Semitic education and indoctrination because, again, like I said, our public schools run on the Jewish calendar, right? Like, I was off for Hanukkah and didn't know what the fuck Hanukkah was. But so, like, you'll get the Jews run New York. It's like, and you think that that's just, like, normal. So, like, this anti-Semitic stuff that would happen inside of New York City for me was normal, right? So like when I was older and having conversations, you know what I'm saying? Like I realized how much indoctrination into my own anti-Semitic behavior just existing, right? I don't hate Jews. I don't align with, you know, Nazi Germany. And these are the binaries that we think we need to in order to hold up certain tropes of white supremacy. So all of that being said is I think that, again, things being evolving for us as Black people in America, race is solely based on the color of our skin. Then when you turn around and say, in America, we've been indoctrinated, not educated, and we're indoctrinated about the Holocaust from an American point of view. They didn't care about the Jews. America just taught us about them saving them from the Germans and never talking about the role of America and our Jim Crow race laws happening at the same time that Hitler learned and then used on the Jews to racialize them. So like, as Black people, it is a very easy thing to turn around and be like, it's not about race. Because that's not how race is applied to us.
Yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense. And that was where that break was coming from, where like that inability to try to understand that, where I think a lot of people were coming with. And at the same time, like you were saying, those multiple truths exist, that it's like, you know, first of all, that is extremely true and important, and then also, like, of course the Holocaust was about race, so it's like that, so it's interesting to actually see how those two things can like do meet in the middle and intersect, where like we look at the continuation of the Holocaust, we look at the resurgence of certain things, where it's like, okay, these things are coming back, and or have always been here. And
like you said, it's just a resurgence. It's always been there. Somebody
it's always
said
been here.
Racism is the problem. Racism is a problem because that's white supremacy. White supremacy did not start at these shores. So I'm not going to pretend this is not a protection of Jewish people, like they're not racist. Anti-Blackness is everywhere, right? Like everywhere. It is not like white supremacy has touched all of us, and white supremacy racializing Black people simply based on the color of our skin.
To, you know, to give me that checklist, to give me that oh, this is the book, recent this one I will suggest. That's
mine. Hey man, go ahead, do it.
I will say Race and Modern Architecture, but it's it's very specifically about this is very specifically about architecture though.
But like also I think here's something is that like if you are going to read the book, because any book, make sure it's written from a person within that marginalized group, right? Because like people ran out and read White Fragility, they were in white groups, and I'm like, so we're gonna keep paying white women who I don't even understand how white people are posed as experts on these things and they're still unpacking their own shit. But go off.
No, she was a what's a con artist from the beginning. She's a con artist. She was benefiting off of that,
capitalizing off of the trauma of Black people. It's like, which is like the epitome of fucking white supremacy. And I'm gonna give you one word: epistemological. Think that all the time. Epistemological. How do I know what I know? That's exactly what that word means. Epistemological knowledge. How do you know what you know?
How do you know what you know?
And that should always have you unpacking. If you can remember that one word, like I said before, when something comes up, how do I know that? Like if somebody was like, oh, like the since we're talking about like, you know, black people steal, like how do you know that? Like, you know, every Black person steal, like where did this come from? Like where is this indoctrination, right? Like if I say something about Jewish people and the first thing that you come back with is some Jewish trope, like where did you get that from? How do you know what you know? For me is like where it begins, like where how do you know? That's
such a good way of that's one of the words that I see sometimes written down. I still can't get into my mind like what does epistemological mean. So thank you for that explanation, because I really like, I still sometimes will see it and I'll be like, what is that?
It's like my favorite word, because like literally that's what I have to do, right? Like I have to be like, I have to think about one thing. Like, okay, wait. How do I know what I know? How do I know this? What has
Yeah.
informed me? What has given me this information that I have? Like, and like, and you have to still take books with a grain of salt. Like I said, who's the author? Or like you said, like, okay, well, who's the father of this architecture?
Right.
Well, he's a white supremacist. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, who's this one? So it's like, it's where you're getting this knowledge from. So for me personally, why I like, you know, like my TikTok is set up. It's like, it's not actual content. It's just me going back and forth in comments and having conversations with people, right? This is it. Like I have a whole online community just for us to talk, because that there is no better resource for me than the people. The people that live it. I could read 1,000 books about Romani people, or I can go follow 5 Romani, you know, creators that are telling their story. Like,
they'll tell you
can
exactly what's going on.
Any of these creators. TikTok is a great place for that, right? And take everything with a grain of salt, because we're all processing trauma on this motherfucker. So like, there's going to be some people that are more harmed and hurt, or there's a lot. Take everything with a grain of salt.
And listen, follow multiple people too. I think that's something that multiple people, because like what happens is that if you follow one person and they give you their perspective on white supremacy, someone from the same group, the same background, may have a slightly different experience. You know, may have a slightly different, and they'll be having conversations. So I'd say, like, you know, go into create. I do follow Black creators, follow Romani creators, follow Jewish creators, follow trans creators, follow people. And pause before, you know, saying, well, that's not my experience. If you're not, if you don't have, because you don't have the same experience as they do. I think that's something that diversifying your feed, that's something that like has been, and that's something that has really, truly, I have learned so much from so many different creators, from Indigenous creators. I did not know about Indigenous environmental activism at all until like a few months ago, you know, until a year ago. And they have taught, I didn't know, I could still read books and everything. But
also is something important. And also like with the following of different creators, don't follow them to back up your bias, right? Like I follow trans creators, and I'm following one that is detransitioning, right? Because I wanted to know, I'm interested in like all of this, because I think that a lot of transitioning is also still forced in the gender binary, right? Like if I get on this app tomorrow and I say I am now he, they, them, whatever, and I say my name is Derek, I should still be able to be looking like this without having to transition to conform to your idea of what masculinity should look like. So I followed them during their detransitioning thing, but it wasn't to be like, see, I told you, trans people shouldn't be transitioning this one person. Like,
because everybody has those different,
exactly. Everybody's gonna have different experiences. Don't do it just to fill your bias.
And one thing too, because I know a couple people in the comments were asking about this. One thing that is to, when you do follow creators and have a very you know, a much more diverse feed, it's important to make sure you're not following them just for the trauma. You know, don't only pay attention when there is something traumatic going on. You know, be there for people's joy, be there for their mediocrity, be there for all the moments of the day, not just when they're fighting for their lives. Like it's something that that is so important. I'm gonna have to go in a couple minutes, but I want to make sure that we get to everything that you wanted to talk about. As much as we can.
It's just like an ongoing conversation. We can do it next time whenever you have some free time. I think ultimately we summed it up, is that I think that it was a missed opportunity to discuss the intersectionalities of the Black experience and the Jewish experience in America. Like, not pitting it against each other, but just like, and how race is applied to different groups of people. I think that was a huge miss for them, and they could have done better, you know. I think we covered, I feel that she was absolutely punished more because she's a Black woman, right?
Yeah.
And that's what race looks like to us in America.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if it's not true because you don't believe it, because that's our lived experiences, that's how we are receiving it. Just like a Jewish person may be receiving that as that's anti-Semitic. And like many of us did not know, I myself did not know that Jews classified themselves as a race, and some do and some don't. So back to that point too.
I wouldn't, but yeah.
Right. Like it's like, okay, I'm just gonna trust the Jewish person in front of me, right? Like,
right.
like as a whole, for me, it's an ethnic group. It's also a religion. Like you could, if you choose to, like they don't proselytize and tell you to, but like just trust people's lived experiences, right? And like for me, seek where we meet more, where our alikeness brings us together more than allowing these systems of white supremacy to divide us. Was pretty much
100%. Yeah. I'm so glad that we got to talk today. Because this is so true. There's and it's true that's like we only, even in the amount of time that we have, this is such there's so much more to talk about. There's there's endless things about how how these things look different in different times and to different people, and all of these things. So I really appreciate us being able to sit down and talk more about this, because it is a thing that cannot be summed up in a 3-minute video, in a series, or anything like that. It cannot be summed up.
It can't be
what's happening here.
It's lived experiences, and those change from moment to moment of what you're feeling and tracking. So thank you for taking time out of your Sunday.
Yes, you too. And thank you all to everyone's here. This is so fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yes. All right, I'm gonna end it now.
I
see you guys like still chatting, but I'm sorry, we're gonna get off. We gotta do other things.
And Pikachu, say goodbye. Oh no.
Bye, Pikachu.
This is bye. But let's talk again soon.
Yeah, I'm totally down. You let me know when.
100%. All right.
Bye. Bye guys.